All right, it is 7:01. Welcome, everyone. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Welcome to regular meeting number 1414 of the Wachusett Regional School Committee. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Holden TV channel 194 and holdentv.com. The first item on the agenda tonight is public hearing, and I do see that we have a few people signed up for public hearing tonight. So if you can, please limit yourself to 3 minutes. As long as everyone limits themselves to the appropriate time, I'll let everyone speak who's signed up. So the first person signed up today is Jesse Weeks from Princeton.
I will set a timer and try to be true to the time. Thank you. My name is Jesse Weeks. I live at 137 Wheeler Road in Princeton, Massachusetts. First of all, I'm incredibly grateful to everyone here for their service, for the many unpaid hours you spend dealing with every sort of issue that comes your way. Two more issues to come your way, and I'll try to be very brief. One is an issue, and some of you are probably familiar with the vernacular, but if you're not, it's the Positive Behavior Intervention Support Initiative, or PBIS. I can only speak to my experience at Thomas Prince, which for the last 8 years has been nothing but wonderful. But the PBIS initiative, as it's implemented at Thomas Prince, is through a paper currency called Tommy tickets. And I don't know how many of the other schools in the district or elementary schools have those. For good behavior, you might get one Tommy ticket from a teacher, or you might get 10 for the same behavior. It's sort of an unregulated and unfettered system, and I think the hard part about it is the fact that it's a paper currency. Kids tend to create stacks of them, wads of them, trade them for things, but they're not without their value. I know in the 6th grade you're exempt from an academic homework for 10 Tommy tickets. And one of the things that I've noticed over the last 3 years since I became aware of them is I've heard all kinds of stories, and I don't know their veracity, but kids trading them for Pokemon cards, kids trading them for drinks, kids trading them to get out of homework assignments. It's something I'd very much like the appropriate committee to look into, and I don't just mean at Thomas Prince, I just mean in general, because there's a lot of online systems where other school districts have had this same issue. If I go from the art teacher's room to the science teacher's room, neither of those teachers knows who just gave one student 10 Tommy tickets for the same thing as they gave a student one Tommy ticket for. And so students can come home with 20 Tommy tickets in a day or one, and nobody knows how many Tommy tickets each student is getting from day to day. So there's systems like Minga, which is a digital system. So it's a non-transferable sort of Tommy ticket system where you just put a check on someone's name. You were really good in class today, whatever the situation may be, and then you move on. And that's part of a digital catalog rather than a paper currency where kids, again, like I said, are stockpiling big wads of these Tommy tickets. So it's certainly something that, I've become concerned about. I don't particularly like kids getting out of academic assignments and kids being able to trade these around, again, like a sort of undercurrent of underground currency. Second, I'm speaking for myself, but also I'm speaking for people that I've talked to in the community in Princeton. I don't know, and my second point is about principal or administrator evaluation, to my knowledge, and again, it's very, may I just have a minute or so to conclude? Yep. It's very limited in terms of a superintendent does an annual review, and that's basically it for any sort of administrator evaluation. I would encourage this committee to look into an online system for teachers or even for community members, parents, to be able to also evaluate administrators within the building. And for better or for worse, I do feel like transparency always facilitates trust. One of the things I would encourage the board to look into, though, is the anonymity of these, because I do think, unfortunately, when you're talking about your boss or your kid's principal or your kid's assistant principal, the ability to be candid about that can be somewhat limited by the fear of the stigma or retaliation. So I do think, based on discussions I've had with teachers and with other parents, it would be a lovely way for them to contribute to that process, for administrators to be evaluated beyond just the purview of one person or superintendent. So that would be something I would also encourage this committee to look into. And think you'd find a lot of community support and staff and faculty support for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Katie Antarala from Holden. And I'm reading the names as best as I can, but I apologize if I got your last name
Okay,
wrong.
it's Antonarella. I'm just speaking on special education. Speaking as a parent, we're all very concerned with the state of special education in this district right now. We're really hoping to see some really good ideas from Joan today. But also I wanted to talk about ECC, which is where my daughter is going, and how they're losing help left and right. We're losing teachers and paras, and they're not staying in the district. It's very troublesome. These people have been working at ECC for a very long time and have deep connections with the children, and they're all leaving. There's got to be something that we can do to start keeping these people. We have amazing staff, but if they don't stay, you know, what can we do? We're just really hoping that we see some good things today, and that we can work on trying to get the staff to stay and work on making special education and general education in this district great. Because, you know, if special education's not good, then all of the education in the district is not great. You need to have both. When I moved here, I didn't know that my daughter was autistic, and I had heard what a great school district this is to move to. And I've been very disappointed in hearing everything that I've been hearing about special education, and I understand that it's going to take some work. But I'm really hoping that everybody remembers when they're doing these votes that these are children that we're talking about here. It's not just numbers. They're not just numbers. They're our kids. So please keep that in mind, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next person on the list is A. Perez from Holden.
Good evening. My name is Ashley, and I live in Holden. Based on previous experiences, I'm leading this with the notion that in speaking, I'm concerned about retaliatory actions of this administration. That being said, the school committee needs to be aware of the actual experiences of families of children in the special education here at Wachusett. When my daughter was born at 1 pound, she was given a 5% chance of living a normal life. From that moment forward, we vowed to do everything to help her defy those odds. In August 2021, we intentionally moved, like many others, into the Wachusett district to provide our children the best education possible. Truthfully, we have not had the same experiences at the school level as so many of her peers. With the help of amazing educators and staff, she is excelling, and we are confident, bearing any retaliatory efforts by the administration, that she will continue to do so. But don't let our experience fool you. This is not the typical experience of students with special needs in this district. Under increasing pressure from the administration, students and families are met with resistance and obstructions. Many of our best educators, specifically at the ECC and elementary levels, have left in droves. Retaining quality support staff like paras, who are integral to what we do, is close to impossible. Families are spending thousands of dollars to engage with advocates and lawyers when their children are denied services that they are entitled to. They are entitled to those services. This is unacceptable. The truth is, these families are fighting a special education administration that is unfamiliar with special education laws, intentionally misleads families and school committee members during hearings, violates the rights of students and families, openly retaliates, like sending bills. They have no legal authority to do so, etc. These are just some examples. While I previously stated my daughter's experience has been a great one, my personal experience with engagement of the administration has been one of mistruths, violating rights, retaliatory actions, denial of due process rights, ignoring documented concerns and questions, etc. To be clear, These are not allegations, they are facts with documented paper trails and DESE findings of noncompliance. Over the last 6 months, I've watched the school committee for the first time ever, and I see them be more concerned about burdening the administration than actually holding them accountable. I see a body that would rather shield the administration than provide the oversight that they are duty-bound to provide. Suggestions from CPAC are met with hostility rather than truly trying to get to the root cause of concerns. There was more urgency and probing regarding the auto body floor collapsing at the high school than there were regarding the MCAS scores of students with special needs. I encourage you to take a look at that recording again. One addresses an elective, which is important, but the other addresses a right. Parents are treated as nuances instead of loving caregivers fighting to ensure their children aren't left behind. I'm wrapping up, I promise. Education is one of the greatest foundational elements that serves as a predictor for a child's future success. Deficits, if not addressed, compound and over time impact the ability of our children to live up to their full potential. I implore this committee to listen with open ears and an open mind to the data-supported facts and recognize the dire state of special education in this district. At the end of the day, it's not CPAC, this committee, or the administration that suffers. It's innocent children who have a right to a free, appropriate public education. These children deserve better. I encourage you to listen to families like mine, seek their experiences directly, push the administration to actually answer questions posed to them, meaningful oversight. Ask yourselves, what if this was your child? What if they were struggling with the most foundational aspects of their education? What would you do?
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, I have Lindsay Lucasen from Holden.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Lucasen, and I am a Holden resident. Tonight, I am here to advocate for our children who are forced to navigate classrooms that consistently fail to address their challenges. I am here tonight to lift up the voices of the families who are faced with persistent barriers to the support their children so desperately need. Everyone in this room brings their own unique perspective, understandings, and experiences of disabilities to the table. We don't all know each experience explicitly. To be fair, we need to come together and bring our experiences so that we can really turn this ship around. When we talk about creating education for all students, we really need to mean all, not just most, which is what is happening now. We cannot continue to ignore the needs of these students, nor can we continue to expect them to conform to a system that was never designed to support them in the first place. MTSS framework and high-quality education materials are not reaching the students I'm standing here for tonight. The repeated claims that only a small percentage of families have students being denied their right to a free and appropriate public education in our schools is reckless and misleading. Many families, especially those who lack the resources of time or educational background or financial resources, often face significant hurdles in understanding their rights, navigating special education laws, and advocating for their children. Consider the families who feel overwhelmed by the prospect of a challenging institution that holds all the expertise in special education laws and a legal budget to argue their side. These barriers prevent countless families from seeking the support their children desperately need. The reality is that we have so many families struggling in silence. It is important for all members of this committee to reflect on their behavior in public session. When a family of a student with a disability files a state complaint or requests records, it is not out of malice or a desire to create conflict, but out of a genuine commitment to ensuring their child's educational needs are being met. Filing state complaints and requesting public records are not only fundamental rights protected by law, they are also essential tools for holding the district accountable and ensuring that every student, especially students with disabilities, are receiving the education they are entitled to. Publicly suggesting that these actions are unwarranted or harmful undermines the parents' right to advocate for their children and fosters an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. We have children in our schools who stand at a pivotal crossroad between growing into independent adults capable of shaping their own lives or becoming reliant on others for daily living. Tonight, I am here for the children who are removed from classrooms for bad behavior. That is their silent cry for help. I am here for the children sitting in closets repurposed as calm down rooms because they are so overwhelmed with stress and they lack environments that have the proper support for our neurodivergent children. And tonight I'm using my voice. I am using my voice for our non-speaking children who navigate school without effective means of communication. And they are isolated from their peers. I will continue to come here for children like my daughter, whose success is literally hinging on her educator's understanding of complex learning disabilities. The lack of sufficient support staff and a school culture that actually embraces and uplifts children with disabilities. I am urging this committee, this administration, and every single person in this room to work together, not apart, to ensure that we have equitable educational opportunities for students. I am imploring you to listen to the families that are here tonight. Respect the journeys they have been on. Together, we can cultivate a culture of openness, accountability, and respect. I have witnessed it firsthand, the transformational power of parents and schools who work together. Our district should embody the diverse and inclusive communities that we serve, ensuring that every child in this district receives the support and the opportunities they deserve. We should be working together to create an environment where not just most, but all students can thrive. Thank you.
Next, I have Laura Ybarra from Holden.
My name is Laura Ibarra, and I'm a resident of Holden. I'm here tonight to speak about the PRS complaints in the superintendent's report. I wanted to share a little bit about the PRS process from a family's perspective. The mission statement of PRS is to ensure that students, families, school districts, and other community members have easy access to information regarding learners' rights and educational options, and to a forum for the resolution of disputes that is prompt, accurate, and fair. In my experience, it has not been prompt, accurate, nor fair. And that's not because we have achieved the outcomes that we have not achieved the outcomes that we anticipated, but because it has come at a significant amount of time, expense, energy, and effort in order to hold the school district accountable for fulfilling their obligations under the law. A complaint is supposed to be resolved within 60 calendar days. As you can see from the information in the superintendent's report, there are 11 cases that are still pending due to DESE's backlog that exceed this time frame, some dating back to January or March. In addition, if you reviewed the data for the specific cases, you would see a similar trend. So for example, if a family files a complaint in November, they may not get a determination from the state until June. An entire school year has gone by. This is not an effective remedy for families to get the solution that is needed. Further, if a non-compliance finding is determined, the corrective actions must be completed as soon as possible, but in no case later than 1 year after the identification of non-compliance. But somehow that as soon as possible seems to be forgotten, and both the state and school districts only rely on the in no case later than 1 year. Anyone can submit a complaint, but in order to write a successful complaint, it takes an understanding of special education laws to comprehend the issue at hand and why you believe there's a violation. This is not an easy task. Families often turn to advocates or attorneys to help them. This is an equity issue. Those that are able to afford this are able to be more successful. Those that cannot afford this technical expertise often are not successful in articulating this issue successfully. Once a complaint is filed, a PRS specialist meets with the family. They typically request further information, and then a request for info is sent to the district, and then the district has a deadline to respond. Once the response is received, families have 7 days to respond and provide a rebuttal. But what happens when the special ed administrator responds to DESE and says, given the number of complaints this family has filed, the district will not be conducting our own investigation? That's retaliation. What happens when the district does not respond to PRS by the deadline? What happens when the district provides a false narrative of what transpired? Or the district provides incomplete information to DESE's request? Or corrective action plans issued by the state, our school district's regulatory agency, become past due? Unfortunately, then, the burden falls back onto the family. It shouldn't, but it does. And all of this continues to happen within our district. As a result of these issues, families spend an unbelievable amount of time providing to DESE what the district should do, or correcting the district's false narrative, omitted information, or even mistruths with written information that can serve as evidence. They also have to ensure that they're presenting it in a neat, organized fashion so an investigator can easily understand it. These are parents of children with disabilities that simply don't have the bandwidth. There are times that this documentation could be hundreds of pages. I can assure you that no one is benefiting from the PRS process. Trust between families and the district becomes eroded beyond repair. The system is designed to favor the school districts. That's not something that we can fix. But as a result, children suffer. These situations do not have to reach this level of dysfunction. We need leadership that is committed to responding to parents' concerns and making genuine attempts to resolve them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's everyone that I had signed up for public session. Did I miss anyone who had signed up? Did you sign up? Okay, come on up. Just please state your name so we know who's speaking.
Michelle Graywall from Holden. All right. So good evening. Again, you're hearing from a number of families, and I think there's probably 1,000 things that I could say, but I'm going to do a little compliment sandwich, because that's always good, right? Right? That's a good way to teach it. So first, my children go to 2 different schools. My older 2 go to Davis Hill, and my youngest is at Houghton and Sterling. I wanted to share something positive that I had observed when I was, volunteering with the school. I noticed that there were a lot of really great practices at Davis Hill, seeing a lot of good friendships, good inclusion opportunities. So I just wanted to reinforce that as a parent, I have seen that among some of their special educators and some really great collaboration. So I think that's always important. The challenge here is that I'm limited on what I can say publicly because of the position that we're in. And I've stood before, maybe not our awesome new student reps, but many of you before. This will be my 4th time, I think, in the recent times at school committee and speaking publicly, exercising, our rights as Americans to do so. And it's hard because we need transparency, we need accountability, and I would just have to really reiterate all the things that the that the other speakers have said. If I could, give it a thumbs up and just really share that so many other families feel that as well. I stand here because I am able to, and I'm in the middle of something that is so serious with the district, that there have been a lot of challenges and issues, and even speaking here today, it's closely monitored. So all I will say is that we are in a very challenging time, and that while I have the resources to stand here and continue to address the inaccuracies, the injustices, the inequities, many families don't. Actually, most families don't, and the economy's not getting better. And so I'm just asking, please, as a committee, to please have accountability, transparency, and hold both accountable and provide support to the administration, right? This is not something, where I've ever wanted to make public requests for information. It's not something I've ever wanted to do. I've learned how to do it, but it's not something I've ever wanted to have to do. But I will do it because it's my right as an American to be able to do that, and as a taxpayer. So all I'm asking is to please take this very seriously, because this is what the role is. And then the last thing that I will say is I really appreciated some of the new after-school activities that are going on at Houghton. I think Principal Boss, there's the drama club, and I really like that their PTO is getting up and going, and I like that there's some cohesion between the two schools. So I did want to share that for my Sterling friends, to just say that we really appreciate the community there. So that is my compliment and public hearing sandwich. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that's our time for public comment. We'll move on to Chair's opening remarks. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for attending this evening. We have several important reports from administration tonight, so I'm going to keep my remarks very brief. Our main agenda tonight is 2 reports from administration, a report on special education from Dr. DeAngelis, and a report on bullying by Director Litaz. Both of these areas have been subject of extensive discussion over the past 6 months in these meetings and are personally important to me, so I look forward to hearing these reports. And just as a quick reminder, our next meeting will focus on committee business, and I'm expecting items from the Facilities Subcommittee on building inspections and capital projects, as well as from the Superintendent Goals and Evaluation Subcommittee on approval of goals for this year. That's it. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Student Representatives Report. Jack or Cameron, do you have a report for us today?
This past week, Wachusett Regional High School celebrated Spirit Week with enthusiasm and high participation. Faculty and seniors were neck and neck in a spirited competition for the highest level of involvement. This week culminated on Friday with a green and white day and an exciting pep rally. The rally featured several fun activities, including a pass the balloon game using anything but hands, musical chairs, tug of war, wrapping a staff member in toilet paper, and a 3-legged race. On Friday evening, we hosted our homecoming football game against Natick. Although the Mountaineers faced a tough loss, the Badlands remained as lively and energetic as ever, setting a great tone for the homecoming festivities. The celebration continued with the homecoming dance on Saturday, which was well attended. A total of 1,408 tickets were sold, 1,223 student tickets, and 185 guest tickets. As a part of the homecoming tradition, each grade created a banner, and in my completely unbiased opinion, the seniors' banner was the best. These banners are now proudly displayed in the school cafeteria. In honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the girls' volleyball teams will be hosting their 13th annual Dig Pink game on Friday, October 11th against Neshoba. The teams are excited to continue this community service tradition, raising funds for a meaningful cause. All games will be held in the main court, with JV2 playing at 4, JV1 at 5, and varsity at 6 p.m. Admissions will be $5 or $3 if attendees were pink. The music department is busy with their fall concert taking place on Wednesday, October 9th. This concert will feature all ensembles, and more information is available in the department's monthly newsletter. Additionally, the department recently had a successful mattress fundraiser and will soon begin their annual fruit sale. On Saturday, October 19th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., the National Honor Society is running a community service event entitled Haunted Hallways. Children aged pre-K through 5th grade and their families are invited to trick-or-treat in the hallways at the high school. There have been a lot of effort put in by our NHS members, officers, and our advisor, Lori Monteverdi, so I'm confident that the effort will pay off. As we approach the end of the first quarter, on October 25th, Wachusett will be holding family teacher conferences on Thursday, October 10th. There will be 2 sessions available, session 1 from 11:40 a.m. to 10 p.m., and session 2 from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. This year, parents and guardians will have the opportunity to schedule appointments directly with teachers through an online portal. Principal Pratt also recently held the inaugural meeting of the Principal Student Leadership Council. At this meeting, in which I took part, we discussed participation, further meeting dates, and agenda items, and I look forward to providing updates as the council's work progresses. The first SIMCO meeting will take place on Tuesday in the administration conference room, and NEASC will be visiting in October to begin the reaccreditation process. Throughout the fall, colleges continue to visit Wachusett to meet the seniors. On average, 5 to 7 colleges visit each week, and I will be attending meetings with representatives from several schools. Additionally, the second annual job fair will be held on October 23rd during lunch blocks, providing students with opportunities to explore potential employment. Oopsies. And lastly, I recently spoke with an administrator from Fitchburg Public Schools who shared information about a technology that the district uses for anonymous reporting in cases of violence, hate, or other situations that students or staff may encounter. With a report on bullying on tonight's agenda, I believe that this technology is one that the committee should explore to determine if it would be useful or appropriate for our district. Thank you.
Thanks. All set? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. So we'll now move on to the superintendent's report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Riley.
Thank you very much. So just wanted to go over the agenda tonight. My hope is to pause after a few of these and open it up to the committee through the chair for questions or comments or requests for additional information. Tonight, we're hoping to report on problem resolution system data, share some updates in terms of the FY26 budget, give an update on teacher-family conferences, provide a special education report from Director DeAngelis, provide, looking for clarification from the committee in an update in terms of our special education program review, and then also provide a bullying update from Dr. Lataz. Barry, I didn't know if you could join us as well at the, I was going to ask Mr. Sklar to join us to look at some of this data as well and be available at the podium to answer some of your questions. The problem resolution system is a system developed by DESE that handles complaints that allege a school or a district is not meeting legal requirements for education. Anyone, including parents, students, educators, community members, and agency representatives may contact the PRS office for assistance. Managing PRS complaints is a very time-consuming process and cumbersome for both parents and staff. The PRS system is for all school-related issues and not exclusively for special education. We have been charged, and there was a request for us to share PRS complaint data, and we want to share with you what our approach was to sharing that data with you. There was a report that we shared in the superintendent's report, and we're going to hit some of those highlights here tonight. What it does include is a log of every district PRS case since August 2022. The date of that case, the case number, whether or not it was special education related, what the outcome was, the number of compliance findings, if applicable, and the number of non-compliance findings, if applicable, and then the general category of non-compliance findings. What we didn't include in this PRS data report are the specific statutes and regulations cited in each PRS finding. And then we also did not include details on corrective actions, deadlines, and third-party involvements. And then lastly, we didn't include referrals to the Office of Civil Rights. Primarily, these weren't included because of the capacity for us to provide this information. And then in some cases, this information we didn't feel would be completely pertinent to what we were sharing tonight. I'd share that the Office of Civil Rights, there are no referrals from the PRS system. At times, they would make recommendations that if people felt like there was a violation, that those complaints should be forwarded to the Office of Civil Rights. In terms of corrective actions, deadlines, and third-party involvement, as you'll see, the number of complaints that actually we went through and were able to tabulate data was exhaustive. And we felt like the important thing was to give a picture of the number of complaints, what the findings are, and then those general areas that we've been found negligent in if we were at all. So the data that we're sharing tonight was presented, or the complaints were filed by 45 families for a total of 66 complaints since August 2022. Of those 66 complaints, 14 cases were withdrawn prior to any action from DESE. 7 cases were closed without finding. That typically happened because PRS said that they didn't have authority over the questions of compliance that were presented in the complaints. And then lastly, as mentioned a little bit earlier, 11 cases are still pending. Of the 34 cases that resulted in a letter of finding, 10 letters of finding indicated full compliance, and 24 had letters of finding that indicated either complete noncompliance or mixed compliance, in which some items were finding the district in compliance and others were not. Of the 87 total findings that were contained in these 34 letters, 39 were findings of compliance, but 48 were findings of noncompliance. And 39 of those findings were related to special education law or FAPE noncompliance. When we look at the data, our takeaway as a district is several. One of them is a real need to align our district-wide standards of practice. When Director DeAngelis presents later on tonight, one of the things she'll talk about is the standards of practice in the district. And we have to make sure that our standards of practice are aligned and are focused on adherence to special education law regulations. We also have to ensure consistent implementation. At times, and this has been a challenge in the district, we aren't implementing the same procedures, much like we have in curriculums in other areas, but consistent application of best practices at each of our schools. And that's been a focus of some of her work as well in her meetings with special education chairs. We need to improve our communication. It had been mentioned, I think, the last meeting, that we need to have a special ed procedural manual that's available to our parents and on the district website, so people can know what to expect and understand what the district's procedures are, and if the procedures don't make sense or they're not in compliance with procedural regulations, that we make sure that we change them. We also need to leverage the new IEP process and enhance our family connections. One of the focuses of the new IEP process is for student and parents to have agency in the IEP process. And it's an important change that we hope will have an improvement in how people feel the IEP process is effective. And then last, and this was mentioned earlier tonight, we have to work to earn trust. I don't think this is exclusive to the special education department. I think it's a district issue, and I also don't think it's a recent development. I'd argue that any parent who files a PRS complaint, whether there was a finding of compliance or non-compliance, it suggests that there's a lack of trust with the decisions we're making in the district, and that's a concern. And I think that's something that we have to continue to work towards improving, because clearly I don't think, and it was mentioned earlier tonight, that this level of PRS complaints is something that we want to have in the district. I think we all want to have better relationship with our parents and for them to feel like they're getting the services required by their child. But we felt it was important, and I'm glad we were able to share that information with you, because I think if you want to make anything better, you have to share what it is and be honest about it, and that's our attempt to share that data tonight. I'm not sure if at this time there are any questions from the committee.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to open it up to questions at this point. Any questions for the superintendent? Shannon. Yeah.
The green light's on.
Just speak more into the microphone, I think.
It's just hard to digest, like, without, and I understand why that information is not included, but how to know, like, where exactly are we failing in terms of, is it lack of resources? Is it lack of training? Like, where are we failing here in these bits? And, like, how can we correlate that with what we're seeing here?
Joan, do you want to join us at the podium as well, just for a second? And so I think it depends on, when I look at some of the PRS complaints, sometimes it's our interpretation of the regulations, all right? And so sometimes we've had issues in terms of transportation that I think we need to be aligned with the law. And some of the decisions we made haven't been. And so we have to rectify that. I think in some cases with FAPE, I think probably Director DeAngelis is probably better able to answer those questions.
I think the FAPE standard came out of, we had some schools that did not have special ed teachers the year before I arrived, and so we had some compliance issues with delivering special education services in some schools because of an absence of staff. And so there were filings at one school in particular that were many that we weren't able to adhere to the services that were on students' IEPs. So we had to make up a compensatory plan to make those services up.
So the reason I ask is that I find it hard to know as a committee member how to help and how to direct, like what should we be focusing on to correct these? How do we make any actions to do anything? So,
do you have any thoughts in terms of?
I think being fully staffed is really important. I think we opened the year with a couple of resignations this year, and it was a little scary, to be honest with you. I think a lot of PRS complaints came in over a lack of staff or service providers, and I think that we need to actively make sure that we are trying to consistently fill those positions. I think we have had turnover. I think that education is really challenged, I think, across the United States with getting appropriately certified people in positions and attracting people into the positions, and sometimes there's been a delay of services. So encouraging people to apply. We are constantly looking for people to come to the district to provide high quality service. I think that's a huge concern that we've had, especially last year. And we do have problems at the ECC. We have a couple of open positions at the ECC this year that we are working to fill, and we have a very shallow applicant pool.
I'd say my concern and what I'm most interested in addressing is I get concerned when we're having violations in the same areas consistently. I would echo what Director DeAngelis is saying about the staffing. It's hard to get special education teachers and other staff right now, but we have to do it. It's not acceptable that we aren't able to have people in place. And then I think we also have to make sure we're not losing people. You know, that's a legitimate concern, you know, and I think we are changing things, and I do believe that some of the changes we are making, I think they're difficult. I think change is difficult, and I think we are in a period of monumental change in the district, and I think that's hard. However, I would say, and I think when Director DeAngelis reports later on today, and we see some of the positions that we have added to the district and the intent behind them, the goal is to make services better, not to reduce them or water them down. It really is. And I think the data trend, and those are the pieces that I want to make sure that don't get lost in this. This data is from August 2022, and that's well before Dr. DeAngelis actually even got here. But the other piece I'd say is, unfortunately, and it was mentioned before, our data for special education has not been good for a very long time. And so I think like anything else, when there's systemic issues, it takes some time to change the things that need to be changed. But I would say that the status quo wasn't working and has not been working in the district for some time. But I think, as we've said multiple times, both our data for our high need students with the special education, English learners, and low socioeconomic stressed families, but also for special education, they're not acceptable, and they have to be better. And it's why we're trying to put in place so many of these changes.
Go ahead, Jane. And then Malia.
I guess regarding the staffing issues, what has the district done to kind of draw some applicants in? Is anyone going to any like local career fairs or anything like that?
We can have, and unfortunately, Director Biendo's out sick tonight, but I can have him update the committee. It's actually in the strategic plan for us to be attending some of these workshops and then also work to try to recruit highly qualified staff. I'd say, and again, I don't want to say this and pretend like it excuses the fact that we need staff. I would say this is a statewide, even a national issue. in terms of getting qualified special education staff. There really aren't. Those positions truly are at a premium. But do we have to look and expand our recruitment efforts? Absolutely. But I can get you an update and have Bill provide some of the things. Some of it's in the district improvement plan, and it is attending fairs and also looking at how we advertise and how we make those positions available. Dr. Kroll and Mr. Biendo actually both attended a professional development this summer that was put on by William James that is looking at recruiting highly qualified staff. And so we are trying to work in those areas to do a better job, or at least be competitive with everyone in the area of attracting people to be in those positions.
Thank you.
Leah and then Melissa.
I'm very glad we finally have this number, so thank you all for your efforts to provide them. While we can't know all of, the details, I think it was a good start. And I think I can understand some of the frustration, because I know last year we were hearing in general that our PRS findings were mostly in our favor, but this data shows differently. And so I know some of that probably came in since then, but I'm really glad to see the actual numbers, because we probably didn't know, because you guys are very busy, you don't have time to keep track in this much detail, but I'm really glad and thankful that we finally have the data. So thank you for pulling that together. I hope they will change in their direction. I hope even more so that we will have fewer complaints. I noticed there's a large number that were withdrawn. I have heard I know that sometimes happens when something's filed, and then administrators and families will have a discussion. But I would like to encourage the district to perhaps have those discussions before the family has to have a PSR complaint, to do that, because that still takes a lot of time, effort, money, funds, et cetera. I hope in the discussions that we'll hear forthcoming and in the future, we may hear we're moving in a more collaborative direction. I have no way of knowing that, but I hope that we are, because I think that's essential, and that's part of the frustration that I'm hearing from our public commenters and from others, that sometimes some of these discussions could be had earlier in the process, but they're not. It almost forces families to file something, to have the discussion. And then when we have that number of 14 or 15 cases withdrawn, that tells me that those discussions are finally happening, kind of like with the threat of a discussion. It's like when you file for hearing and then you have a settlement beforehand, which thankfully, we're not dealing with. But I'd encourage us to have those conversations and try to have them earlier in the process, so that families don't have to have this situation. However, I do recognize that you said there's a lot of things that have been interpreted different ways through time. This data covers 2 different directors, or actually a period where we didn't even have a director. And so I recognize that, and that the administration is working toward solving some of those gaps and closing some of those gaps. The other question I wanted to bring up is that with regards to staffing, I do know the staffing pool is slim in some areas. I know that we and other districts have had issues with that. Another issue, though, and not just in terms of the number of paras or anyone else attracted to the district, is that I have heard in some cases there's an equity issue with our schools, where some schools have a shared provider of a certain type in their building, and so therefore anytime that provider has a meeting at the other school, they're pulled away from services. OTs or psychiatrists, psychologists. And so I would encourage us to look at that as well, because that is equally concerning. I've heard that from several parents who've contacted me, that they have, not at the ECC, at some of our elementary schools in particular, we have shared providers. And so when a provider is being pulled from one school to meet at the other school, the students at school A aren't getting their services because there's no aid, there's no backup provider, there's no substitutes. And so that seems like a systemic issue that we maybe could work on as well. So I hope to hear more about that, and that things like that are being addressed. So thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you. So I have questions in regards, or not even questions, comments about the takeaways, especially with the leverage of the new IEP that the state has put out. I think the new IEP is a great roadmap. It's definitely more student voiced. So my question is that what is the professional development for your team chairs? And maybe you're addressing this in your other presentation, and the general education teachers for the new IEP process, also providing families with how the new IEP process is going to be rolled out here in the district.
So that is all in my presentation, and
Thank
I
you.
will answer questions. If I don't respond to something that you just asked, I'd be
Perfect.
happy to respond to that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Laura.
And I am looking forward to that presentation. But I will just offer that, when we were dealing with issues in the business department, that we hired additional staff to act as a bridge between our departments and to really beef up our personnel. And I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity there to investigate, how we can beef up the office staff so that one of the biggest things that I'm hearing is communication, responsiveness and trust. And if we're trying to do that, it's difficult to know where that's happening, where the breakdown is happening. Is it happening at the school and then again at the central office, or is it just at the central office? I'm not 100% sure I know the answer to that. And so I would just offer as an opportunity that fix, that temporary fix at the business department seemed to be a good strategy, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here for us to explore some solutions there so that we can bridge this gap as well.
I would just share that, yeah, we operate far too often in crisis. And that part of this is resources. I think what we struggle with is trying to make sure we identify the right resources that we need to add. And when Director DeAngelis presents tonight, you'll see some of the resources that we've added. And, this year we've added an additional team chair. One of the things, and she'll mention this later, is it's very hard in our schools in terms of our team chairs are primarily our assistant principals. And that has an impact on a couple levels. One is a lot of time, and I have to say they are doing the best job they can, but we are asking them to perform miracles. We're asking them to support instruction in the buildings, and then we're asking them to be specialists in special education. And in many cases, they haven't had previous training in this. And so I do think Director DeAngelis has done a nice job working with them in their meetings and trying to get those standards of practice. But I think your comparison to business is actually a really good one. This is one of the departments in the district that was in complete disarray. And we're trying to rebuild it, but people are tired of waiting. And because we are in crisis, they don't get great communication, and they're frustrated. And I think we all understand that. I think our challenge right now is to make sure that we're identifying the right positions to add and to have a strategy, because, as we talk about when we go into the budget process, there are so many needs and so many things that have not been put in the place of the district that we really want to make sure that if we add a position, it's sustainable. We can make it equitable, because I think Member Gustafson's point about trying to make sure it's equitable across schools is a good one, and that it's really going to make a difference. And so, but yes, I would 100% agree that that's a big part of all this.
I want to pick up on what you said, because I agree. I feel like some of this is a staffing issue, and this 66 complaints seems high to me. I don't have data on what it was 5 and 10 years ago, but it does seem like it's pointing towards a problem. And I'm glad to see that we're admitting that we have a problem and we're looking to solve some of these things, and I hope it goes down. But really, to pick up on what Laura said, I really wonder about how much of this is communication. You know, 66 complaints is a lot of time for us, but also a lot of time and frustration for parents, as we've heard, right? So I wonder if we could improve the communication by maybe some extra staffing even in the central office to respond to these things before they get to the point of a PRS complaint. If we'd spend less time chasing complaints, and it may save us money in the long run, even though it's more staff. So yeah, I agree with what Laura said, and I think it's something we should look at in the next budget year. Anyone else have something new before we move on? All right, I think we should move on. Oh,
Can I just ask?
sure.
I wasn't around when the business stuff was happening. Is the only time that we can deal with that kind of thing during budget?
You can't hear?
Can you
Yeah,
maybe
speak
use
right into the
somebody else's
microphone,
mic?
or maybe there's a problem with your
Sorry.
Yours is loud.
That one's working.
So,
That's better.
yeah, that's better. So I wasn't around when the business stuff was happening, but I'm just curious, is the only time that we can really tackle something like that during budget season, or is there anything that we can do in the meantime for bringing on new staff, or I don't know the answer to that, and
Can't
that's
change
really
the
to
budget in the
everyone.
middle of the year, but I asked Dr. Riley to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the, I think we've looked at how we build budgets in two ways. And so we look at it and trying to advocate for student needs, kind of do it a needs-based budget. But then we've also tried to look at efficiencies. And when I say efficiencies, look at the money in the positions that we do have and try to make sure that they're the right positions and are serving the right purpose. And so an example I'd give is some of the class size adjustments that we made this past year, which weren't only in our typical classrooms. We actually added a special education teacher for one of our elementary schools as well. And we've actually added I think 2 or 3 special education teachers in the last 2 years that weren't part of the budget process. And so we are doing that as it goes along. And then one of the positions you'll see when Director DeAngelis presents later on is we added a team chair that's being shared between, I'm going to get this wrong, Dawson and Mayo, I believe. So we are doing these things, but it doesn't, I think at times, I don't think everybody feels it. And unfortunately, they haven't covered the entire district. And partly what we're trying to do is figure out, all right, what makes the most sense? You know, so many of them are interdependent decisions. So Maria giving a presentation at the end of last spring talking about what our guidance coverage should truly be. And it involves having guidance counselors, school adjustment counselors, and school psychologists, and having them all have defined roles. This past year, we made some of those adjustments because we were able to, through a kind of a neutral budget process, we were able to increase the guidance staff at both Houghton and Glenwood. And so now every school has at least one designated guidance counselor. But there's so much. And we really did feel a little hamstrung by the budget last year because of the Chapter 70 support from the state. But I think we need to continue to look at some of the moves that you hear about tonight. Do we want them to be applied across the entire district? Absolutely. And I think, we try not to do the administrative ones. You try to make the positions that are going to have a direct impact on kids. But unfortunately in the district, I think people feel like we're very top heavy, and we really aren't. That's not what the data suggests. And so we have tried to add some team chairs into process where you can have people who are going to be dedicated to running these IEP meetings, to make sure that parents' voice is going to be heard, and that there's a plan that feels like it is a team process and everybody has had input into it, and that's a big part of it. And I can only acknowledge that that continues to need to happen, and those will be some of the positions that we advocate for moving forward in the next budget cycle. I think we haven't been trying to go slow, but I think we have tried to make sure when you only have so much in terms of resources that we're making the right decision. And again, it's something that hopefully we can apply across the district. I think what we don't want is to have a great model at one school, but because you live in another town or even just across town, you don't. And we're not there yet. I mean, that's where I say, member Gustafson's right. You know, we are still sharing positions at some places, and it's not an ideal practice. But we also want to be careful that we're not staffing a full-time person in a building when they're not going to have a caseload that compares to somebody who's at another school and is twice as much. So we're really still trying to do a lot of that work, and there's a lot to untangle. And so that's the best I can describe it. It's like if we had we had the report about our HR and business practices, and there were like 20 recommendations, and the same could be said for special education. And I think tonight, when Director D'Angela shares, she can share some of the things that she has identified already and is working. I think to everybody's point, what's hard is when you're in crisis, you're fixing problems and then trying to think proactively about how you're going to get out of this mess, and it's just it becomes too much. And so we've got to find a way to negotiate that better.
Yeah, so I think we all want to get to Director D'Angela's report. We're already
I feel like Dr. Riley did half of it.
Let's move, yes, but I think, but let's move on.
So briefly, I just wanted to provide a budget update and to share the current status of where we are in FY26. Tomorrow, there's going to be a Project 211 Zoom meeting that's hosted by MARS. MARS is the Massachusetts Association for Regional Schools. One of the things I just mentioned was that the budget process was made especially difficult because our town partners were asked to fill a much larger portion of the district budget than previously because we were in hold harmless status. And effectively, their rates or their contributions went up substantially because of that. I think we got the increase in Chapter 70 funding was approximately $2 million less than it had been the year before, even after the adjustment. So MARS is hosting Project 211. 211 refers to the 211 districts in Massachusetts that were in hold harmless status last year. I think that's 2/3 of the districts, I think, if I'm right. And we have invited all of our district partners. We've sent invitations to our to their committees, FinComs, also their select boards, hoping they can join us in MARS so we can partner in terms of how to solve what has been the budget biggest issue, I think, in that districts like Wachusett are not properly represented and get the funding from the state that some other districts do. And so we're hoping that some of that work can result in some meaningful change moving forward, but I did want to let people know that work is taking place. I also wanted to share our October SIMS report. So it's important to note that this information has not been certified, but typically we take student population counts as of October 1st. And our preliminary count indicates that we've had a student reduction again. That was not on our radar. And so effectively what that means is that puts us at a higher risk to be in hold harmless again. And that was not on our radar when we looked at the projections in terms of our student population. The primary decline isn't incoming students, and so our kindergarten class really balanced out our graduating seniors. But we continue to struggle with our 8th graders choosing to go to other high school options than our high school. And right now that's at an all-time high. And so we're going to continue to look at that, but it is a concerning development in the budget for the next year, and be working with our town partners and advising them as soon as those numbers are certified. But it suggests that it's important for us to have a process with the FY26 budget that starts earlier than it typically has. On another note, I would want to share that the Operations Service Division, and what they do is they set some of the early inflation adjustments. That inflation adjustment this year is 3.42%. All right, and that if that stays stable, if that is stable, that bodes better for us than the budget last year, which I think was around a little bit more than I think 1.5% of the adjustment for inflation. However, what I'd share is that rate was at 4.6 last year when they made that first announcement, so it's something that we're going to continue to have to watch closely. I'm sharing all this not to try to make people nervous, but I'm trying to say this is the information we're getting in right now, and it's going to be extremely important for us to be thoughtful and to be communicating with our towns in terms of what our anticipating funding numbers from the state will be. And so we're going to engage in that process moving forward. Part of that I want to share is pursuing potentially another roundtable with the towns. There used to be a process where we would have a roundtable with the towns in November. I think we're going to reach out to them and see if that will be possible again. We're in a year, and our district improvement plan talks so much about resources. And so whether it be for special education or other parts of the district, positions that we traditionally haven't had, supporting MTSS and also supporting things like health and wellness in our schools that we feel like are going to have a huge impact, and they really are needed in the district. And so we want to present that information to them and make sure they understand that this is our approach and why we feel like these decisions are so important, and to work with them, and if needed, support potential overrides in our towns, because we need to make changes to improve the experience of all our students. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions about the budget or where we are.
Any budget questions before we move on? Seeing none, you can move on.
So finally, I just want to speak to people a little bit about our teacher-family conferences. I want to thank our teachers, our administrators, and our curriculum department. They've done a lot of work, and it sounds like something like this could be a very easy initiative, and you know, what's so hard? You're just going to invite people in to talk to teachers about their kids, and it's a lot more complex than that. And so I just certainly want to thank the teachers in terms of opening themselves up to a new practice. Thinking that this, I think, on many levels is a good idea. Our administrators, who in some cases have been reaching out to their parents to let them know what they are going to be able to offer, and our curriculum department, which has supported this throughout. Amy, Laura, Lisa, and Jen, who really have worked hard to make some of these things available so teachers feel secure in what they're going to be talking about with parents and what that will look like. As of Friday, we had 4,076 students who were represented by a student conference, at least one, and there were a total of 7,672 total conferences that were scheduled. So we're excited about that. That's a significant part of the population. This first year, we're really trying to focus on the homeschool relationship. And you know, that's one of the things, whether you look at our data in terms of belonging or again around communication, it's trying to build that initial bridge so people feel comfortable with the adults who are caring for the kids every day, and can ask questions about how their adjustment to school is going. We also, I would want to acknowledge that we know that this year's iteration of what conferences are is not necessarily what it will be moving forward. And so we're going to be working hard to survey. We already have a survey developed so parents can give us feedback about the process, what they liked, what they didn't like, and then there's a component of it that's actually open response. And so we can get pretty specific in terms of people telling us about what their experience was. We're under no notions that this is going to be perfect. I would say that, like a lot of things we are trying to do in the district, I do think it's going to be a step in the right direction. One thing, one note that kind of brings this point home is the fact that we're going to have all virtual conferences at Mount View. That's not ideal. We would love to have an in-person option for those parents, and we'll work towards that in the future. I think potentially we're going to have to add a third day moving forward as well. It's a challenge, especially at the middle school level, I'll say, because I think people are hoping to interact with multiple disciplines, and so you're actually scheduling in some places, 4 times as many conferences during the same time allotment. I do want to thank Mount View, both the teachers, the families, and then also the administration, because I think they've done the best they can to make this work, and I can only pledge that we will try to take the feedback and take it in earnest and try to make things better next year for everybody.
Any questions about the conferences? Laura.
I want to thank you for the work that goes into, and all the district people who are involved in organizing that. I know it is a heavy lift to get those meetings orchestrated. But I wonder, it sounds like you've got an opportunity and a mechanism for feedback from the families. I also wonder if there's a mechanism for feedback from the staff who are engaged in this work. It strikes me as a possibility that our English teachers and our math teachers will probably bear the brunt of this kind of work, not to exclude other disciplines, but just with the nature of MCAS testing and so on and so forth. So I'm just interested to hear how that plays out.
Yeah, no, great point. I know we haven't developed a survey for them, and I'll be honest with you, though, it's a very valid point, and yes, we should.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Sherry?
I'm also impressed with how the system's set up. I know this has been a long project, from teacher contract down to the app that you guys are using. I do question at the high school how semester 2 classes are incorporated into this with kids who are, will have brand new teachers come January. If there's, maybe not this year, but in future years, a thought of how to incorporate that.
Yeah, again, not on the radar, but a great point.
Any other questions? All right, I think we're ready to move on.
Great. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. DeAngelis and our special education report.
First, I just want to thank you all, and I appreciate having the opportunity to present on special ed this evening. Providing this time to give you a comprehensive update to the committee and the community is really important, and the work of the past school year has been voluminous. So I'm really excited about the work that's been done in the past year. There's certainly more work to go, but I'm going to start with kind of laying out the groundwork when I arrived. So upon my entry into the district, the first thing I did was I started with 13 school visits. I met with each principal. I had a variety of entry questions to kind of really get some perspective from them about the special ed programming in their schools and how services were delivered. This allowed me to hear their perspective of what was going well, where they were looking for change, and where they felt we needed to improve. It really helped me gain some insight and understanding around the delivery of special ed services, but a picture really paints 1,000 words. So after those visits in July and August when school opened, I went back to all 13 schools and I toured each of the schools. I think that was really helpful because actually I was able to walk into the programs and see who were the program staff, who were delivering services to our students, and how were we delivering those services. After that launch, what I did was I took my series of questions, and if you walked into my office, you would have seen lots of anchor charts on my wall because I was looking for common threads. How do we service our students? What services are we providing? What is the special ed staffing ratio in each of the buildings? I was really looking at a deep dive around equitability, and then I was looking at what are our programs? Who are we servicing students through programs, and what are the staff that make up those programs? So those anchor charts stayed up for a really long time, but what I thought was really missing was some data points. So I went into the IT office about mid-September. Barry is smiling, and I said to him, can you run a report of all the service deliveries by school for each of the students? That report did not exist. So that tells me that no one had been looking at that off the bat. So that's a really important element of, if you're going to look at every single student, we have about 1,150 students, plus or minus, every day it changes. You really need to know what is the service provision in each of those schools, who is getting what services, and what is the staffing allocation of each of those buildings, and does the staffing allocation match what the building needs are? So Barry went frantically working and created a report of each of the schools so I could really do an analysis of what the services were by school. And so there were some uncoverings in that report around what we are providing for students and how we are providing it. So it gave me a window into what do we have versus what do we need. And so then I was able to look across the district, and you know, I think that when Dr. Litaz came and met last year, we really lacked school adjustment counseling and guidance counseling across the district. I think we had some roles like the school psychologist who were completing FBAs, who were doing psychological testing, who were providing counseling to students, who were chairing meetings. So their roles were so vast, I was wondering, how are they getting all of this work done and getting it done on time for team meetings? They were very stretched thin. So Marie and I started to really talk about what do we need in the schools versus what do we have. So as I go on in the presentation, you will see some of the recommended changes and additions that we made to staffing in that area. I think the other thing that helped me with assessment was that IDEA indicated data report for the targeted needs improvement. I came in April and presented that to you. I know that was kind of a little deflating at one point, but it was good data because it was a message to us about how we were delivering services and how our students were functioning. So between looking at service delivery reports in school and looking at that IDEA report, I said, we are pulling students out of instructional time at a significant rate. So that was really concerning, and I could see that from the data report that Barry ran for me, and it just validated when we got that IDEA report of why our students were not doing as well as their neurotypical peers. So that was really concerning to me. And so then we started to have those conversations about the why. Why are we pulling kids out so often? And often we think pulling kids out of their classes to fill in a gap is a good thing. But at the same time, if we're pulling them out when general ed content is being taught, we are creating another gap for our students. So I was significantly having those conversations with principals. And I think if they were here today, they would tell you that they have significantly changed their schedules. So we are not doing that this year. We have something called sacred time, and we have time if kids need to be pulled out of content that is specifically defined. But that, was a lot of work that they did this summer to really think about how to schedule students differently. So I want to go on to the LEA determination of needs. I think I've talked about this a little bit, but our school was identified as needs improvement. I reviewed all those data points with you back in April on the rubric. So this year, couple of things have happened since that meeting. I have attended 2 web conferences outlining the expectations for our district. I shared with other districts that were on that call the presentation I did with all of you. One of my colleagues said, "Can I borrow that?" And I said, "Absolutely." They really liked how the presentation was broken down. I've confirmed with the 240 grant compliance with having to reserve 2% of the 240 funding, which is about $37,000, to target those areas of indicators to demonstrate improvement. Shortly after those 2 conferences that we had with DESE, they reached out and asked if Wachusett would partner with them on hosting the root cause analysis workshops. So those are happening in our district. We will be having other districts and DESE special education strategies coming here 3 days in October and 2 dates in January to do that work. So I'm really happy to have them here hosting. And in addition to that, I've also identified some inconsistent practices that may have led to some low ratings in terms of the determination of need. So one of the things I want to talk about is we have several district programs in the district, as you know. We have a therapeutic learning center. We have the PACE programs. We have the AIM program. We have the developmental programs, which we are going to work on renaming. In our district. We have programs at the high school as well. Any student that was in a program, we were marking them as to be in substantially separate programs. So the problem with that is you can be part of a program but still be in a full inclusion placement. We should be really calculating the time on the service delivery grid to determine what the student's placement is. So I'm gonna unfold that and peel that back a little bit for you. So any student that is less than 21% of the time out of the general ed setting is considered to be in a full inclusion placement. Any student that gets 21 to 60% of the time pulled out of the general ed content is partial inclusion, and substantially separate is any student that is 60% or more outside of the general ed setting. So we are applying one standard. If you're associated with a program, we were checking the box of substantially separate. So that leads to some questions in terms of our rates of inclusion. At the time we received this rating, the determination of need, we had 56.2% of students in partial inclusion. I'm sorry, in full inclusion. I wonder about that now because we weren't calculating time. We were identifying students by being in substantially separate if they were a part of a program. So what I'll tell you is that you could be in any program and be part of any program and still be a fully included student. So we are working as a team now of team chairs to make sure that we are calculating appropriate time and identifying that appropriately on the IEP. So it's probably not the only problem that we have, but it is one problem that I've identified through doing some of this root cause analysis work. So I want to talk about staffing next and really aligning our resource to best support our students. If you go back, I believe last March, the superintendent talked about our staffing patterns in the district and elements that were missing. After an analysis and understanding of staffing in the district, it was clear to me we were asking our paraprofessionals to provide a wide variety of intervention, and some wasn't in the scope of their positions. When Superintendent Riley came in March of 2024 and showed the staffing data with our peer averages, our FTEs were higher. That was the highest level of staffing that we're using compared to our data peers. So that was telling me that we were hiring paraprofessionals to support our students and not thinking about maybe a variety of faculty members that could be delivering those services. So instead of maybe hiring a special ed teacher, we were hiring a paraprofessional to provide that service to a student. I just want to be really clear, though, that paraprofessionals are essential members of our team, and they're part of the fabric of the work that we do. We need them. They do very important work, but they need supervision and training with the populations of students that they're working with, and we were hiring them at a very high rate, and we were seeing a high turnover rate. And so there was some questions for me around that of what types of supervision and support are they getting? What do their schedules look like? Who is providing them the direct support and instruction in terms of what students need in terms of IEP service provision? So I think that we have to really think about our goal being have an optimal balance between providing direct support and empowering our students to grow independently, and we have to think about what is our paraprofessionals' role in that process. So throughout the 23-24 school year, we identified a number of opportunities to reallocate staff resources through attrition. So I want to go through the staff additions that have happened in the last 2 years. But the first thing I want to say to you is that the district leadership team participated in a book study this past summer, and this quote really stood out to me. All students are general ed students first, and servicing students with disabilities is the responsibility of all teachers. So that was really powerful to me. It was about page 7 of that book, and I've walked around and talked about that a lot. It has to be a we. It has to be our special ed teachers, our general ed teachers, our paraprofessionals, our related service providers. We all have a job to do. We can't just rely on one type of staff to give the best to our students. So as we started having these conversations, and we had some staff that left through attrition, these are some of the positions that we've been able to add. We added a BCBA at Naquag. We increased a BCBA at Glenwood from 0.5 to 1.0. We increased the BCBA from at the ECC to a 0.5 to, they're located at ECC full-time, 1.0, but they are available to Paxton and Thomas Prince 1 day a week if they need consultation. That was something lacking in both of those towns. We added a special ed program teacher at Naquag. We added a special ed teacher at Dawson. We added a special ed teacher at Davis Hill. We added a special ed teacher at Mayo, and we added a special ed teacher at Central Tree. In addition, we added a reading specialist at the high school. We added a TLC, school adjustment counselor at Davis Hill. We added a TLC program counselor at Dawson. Our school adjustment FTE increased at Houghton from 0.5 to 1.0. Our school adjustment counselor at Glenwood increased from 0.5 to 1.0. We increased at Mayo from 1.0 to 1.4. We added a full-time team chair at Houghton and Choxet. We have a school psychology FTE increase from the ECC from 0.5 to 1.0. We added a team chair at Dawson and Mayo. So you can notice on this particular slide there are some stars, and for the team chair positions. This is really an effort for you to recognize that we are trying to allow school administrators to have time to work with their principals, our APs, to focus on instructional leadership and what's happening in the building. So it's been a huge effort to do that. But it's really exciting that we've added all these positions in a short amount of time by just thinking about doing the work differently or looking at vacancies and saying, what do you have versus what do you need? So before I go on, I just want to share a little bit, because an early adopter for change last fall was Mrs. Pelzarski at Naquag. She continued to have paraprofessionals that were leaving one of her programs, and she had posted, hired, people left, reposted, hired again. And so she said, I just feel like I'm just not getting the right staff for those positions. And so I said to her, did you ever think about maybe looking at 2 of those positions and considering hiring a BCBA? You have a program in your building. You have staff that are leaving. If you have a highly qualified, board-certified behavior analyst who can actually work in the program and work in your building and can support those paraprofessionals by modeling, supporting the behavior plans, will that essentially lift the work for those students? I think if she would here today, she would tell you that has been a game changer for her. Those are her words, not mine. So I think that, we have to really look at how do we bring highly qualified staff into the building and support the work that we're doing around us and be really thoughtful about it. And so I have to tell you that after Christina took this little journey and reported it at a principal's leadership team meeting about how this changed her program, many more principals started to talk to me about what else they could use or how they could better use the resources that were allocated in their building. So you just need to know those 2 pages of changes that I've shared tonight has really been in concert with my colleagues. And we've had a lot of dialogue about needs of programs and needs of services across the district. So I'm really proud of the relationships I have with each one of them. I feel like they can come to me and peel back and say, here are my concerns, and we brainstorm how can we better serve students. So we've made a lot of changes. Do I think we're exactly where we need to be? Probably not. I think we're definitely in a much better situation. The one thing I didn't add to the staff addition, and the earlier conversation sparked me, is one of our coordinators retired this past year, Mrs. Hume, who's been a real steady coordinator in this district and very supportive. On her departure, I started to look at the coordinator positions before we filled it. It was clear to me that the coordinators are stretched. And I retooled that position. So Carol was supporting Paxton and Princeton at the time, and the students that live at our group homes at Devereaux, and really assisting them with schooling, whether it was in district or out of district. What element was really missing was the students that really in our TLCs in Holden needed a coordinator desperately. So when we rehired for the coordinator position, that person now has oversight of the K-8 TLC programs and are supporting them pretty, consistently, and is actually at the schools and working with them weekly, in addition to supporting the students at Devereux. Mrs. Hume has come back in a small capacity to help me in Paxton with the AIM program. We've done a lot of work with the AIM program, and she has come back for a few hours every week to support there. So I am now serving as the coordinator for Princeton, and I always have the high school. I always support the high school and meet with that group on a bi-weekly basis. So there's been a lot of real positive change, but I really would like to move forward about, what's our vision? Where are we going? What is going to be creating the culture of inclusionary practices for our students? And so I've been asked many times when I've stood here is, what's your vision? What is your vision for special ed? And I'm going to say to you, this can't be a me, it has to be a we. I have worked through this past year with so many talented administrators, faculty, and staff members, and our vision is to create a culture of inclusionary practice. So I'm going to talk today about some of the new opportunities and resources. I cannot do this work alone. So I just want to tell you, I'm lucky to be here to tell you about a lot of the new things that we've done, but these are the 13 schools that have helped assist me in lifting the work. So some of the new initiatives, I know we've talked about the 2 new unified courses at Wachusett Regional High School. We have civics for 21st century, and we have unified psychology. Those are brand new courses that are running this year. In the spring, for the first time ever, we had a unified track team. I don't know if you got to go and see a meet, but I was there one night, and it was just amazing to see the students be part of that experience. Unified basketball just started this week. They started practices. If you want to come and see our new unified basketball team, we have our first home game on 10/15 here at Wachusett Regional High School at 4 o'clock. In addition to that, we have 3 new program brochures that we've created. The AIM program replaces the language-based program. I printed some materials for your packet so you could see those new brochures. The PACE elementary program, it stands for Personalized Academics, Communication, and Essential Skills, replaces the ABA program at Houghton Elementary. The PACE middle school program, Personalized Academics, Communication, and Essential Skills, replaces the ABA program at Choxett Middle School. Why is this important? It really is the fabric of promoting inclusive practices. We need to have a strength-based focus and align our work around recognizing individual talents and accomplishments of our students. Labeling programs with disability names does not promote inclusive conversations. So creating the brochures as a team assisted us in a couple of ways. We're aligning the work of each program to ensure we are constantly thinking about providing student rigorous learning experience at each level, always keeping the least restrictive environment in mind. So this year, some of the additional sources of support we provided is we brought in some professional consultants. We have not had professional consultants in our district, so I think it's really important that teams that are working with some of our complex learners have the supports they need in place. So Dr. Balanci is a board-certified psychiatrist, and he consults monthly with our TLC programs. If our TLC school adjustment counselor, Ms. Anita Masterson, was here today, she would tell you that was the best professional development she's had in the last 20 years, is being able to meet with Dr. Balanci. Dr. Robbins is an autism expert, and he consults with our programs in Sterling and Rutland. Dr. Murphy is a clinical psychologist who evaluates students with complex learning profiles. So these consultants are really helping us lift the work by supporting us in making suggestions or recommendations on how to better serve our students in district, or how to push them into more rigorous situations in inclusion. This past June, we hired Landmark Consultants. Kate Ryan is out in the district, and she came to the AIM program in Paxton, and they spent a day there evaluating our 3 programs that we have in Paxton. And so this year, we have a contract with them. They'll be working with our AIM program monthly. They will be on site. They'll be looking at teaching practices across the programs, our schedules, and ensuring that we're using common instructional practices and common assessments and data points to inform our work. So these are the terms I use. People hear this about standards of practice with me all the time. You know, defining our work, setting expectations, aligning our procedures. I think that you've heard about the procedural manual since I arrived. The last time that the procedural manual of the district was revised was 2015, so almost 10 years ago. Therefore, this past year, I've really had to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what are the consistent practices that we have across all 3 schools. And what I found is there is not a lot of consistency. So I think people have been transparent with their work. I think meeting with the team chairs on a monthly basis really helps us employ the same practices in a consistent way. We want parents to have the same experiences regardless of the schools they go to. So that is some of the work that we've been doing this year. So one of the things, when parents left team meetings, there were all different types of forms of that summary meeting. So we decided a team, we're going to use a team summary sheet. I gave you a sample in your packet. Some of the topics were aligning our professional practice and writing IEP goals and objectives. How does that align? Sometimes you look at current performance on our IEPs, and the first question is, what can the student do? And oftentimes, I would see what the student could not do. That is not strength-based as far as I'm concerned. So we really started to talk about, this is the section where we're highlighting all the students' strengths. We're going to get to the things in the benchmarks and objectives of what the goals are, but we want to talk about what are their strengths and build on that when we're writing IEP goals and objectives. We want to write strong N1s. We want to memorialize the conversations that have had in team meetings. That's been a real challenge in the district, so one of the things that we're doing this year is we're having people look at service delivery grids to make sure our dates are correct. Sometimes we have not got them right. And we're having other people look at our team meeting summary and say, are they parent-friendly? If I pick this up and a parent read this, would they understand what I'm memorializing about what happened in that meeting? So we're beginning that practice this year to share those writings with one another. The other thing that I uncovered probably last October was many of our students that are out of district were post their graduation date. So I couldn't understand what that was about. And what I realized was we really didn't have procedures in place to track transcripts. So I worked with Kendra Cantrell, the director of guidance. Maria and I meet with her every other week to really align our practices together. And we went on a deep dive to go out and get every senior's transcript, because you have to have certain courses in order to graduate, and sometimes kids were falling short because we weren't monitoring that correctly. So now that there is a data collection sheet, and we did that for all of our students that were out of district, we know that where they stand, and we can communicate with the out of district program what they need to do in order to graduate. Critical. So I'm going to tie that back to that 5-year cohort graduation rate data that we had, right? 78.2% of our students were graduating in 4 years. It should be much higher. I suspect because we were not tracking student data the way we should have been, and students didn't have coursework, that some of those students likely could have graduated on time. We also know that puts students at risk. If you're adding time post-graduation, this also ties to our dropout rate. If you're adding time to your graduation, you may not finish. You may have seen my peers have moved on, and I'm not going to come back. So it is really essential that we're doing this for our students that are out of district. So I get deeply involved with students sometimes. I just wanted to mention that we had 3 students that were at risk last year of not returning to the school. I took on those cases myself and worked with the students, and we came up with very creative plans to make sure they graduated. So I'm really proud to say those 3 students with very creative plans and out-of-the-box thinking got their high school diploma either in June or in August of this past summer. There was one I was calling frequently to ask why he wasn't at tutoring. He was my weekly Friday afternoon call. You know, what I loved about that experience is having that authentic experience with a student and hearing their lens about what's getting in the way was really important, because I can bring that practice forward and say, what do other students need? And he would often share what the struggles were. Or if I left a message, he would call me back and say, you're right, I didn't go to tutoring today. And I would coach him along and say, here's where we are, we're not far away. So being engaged in some of that work for me is really important, because it gives me student perspective as well. This is a tiered focus monitoring year for Wachusett Regional School District. They have changed their procedures a bit, so you will hear more about that this year. They will be on site to look at our data, and they'll be doing a deep dive into Power School. So prior to their on-site evaluation of the district, we had to submit indicator data for 11, 12, and 13 and submit that through DESE's new CHAMP systems. So indicator 11 is that data for initial evals and have we done things within the timelines. Indicator 12 is early intervention, so any students that have been referred for special education, have we had their meeting and their IEP in place before their 3rd birthday? And indicator 13 is for those students 14 plus, have we included them in our meetings, and do we have transition goals? So that was work that we had to also do across all the 13 schools this year. It was amazing, and it was a learning curve because CHAMPS is brand new, so we had to do a very different data dive and dump into that system, and it wasn't without its bumps. The other thing I wanted to mention was ESY. When I got here early on in the district, I went out to ESY because it was just opening probably a week after I arrived. I had an opportunity to really look at ESY and see the services that we were providing for students. So that led to lots of questions. What I found out was we were not collecting data consistently around regression. And then when you collect regression data when students are away from school, it's really important to have those conversations at a team meeting. We want to know what the impact is when kids are away from education. Are they regressing in areas? Because what we know is they're going to need summer services. We can't take those, 8 or 9 weeks and think that we don't have good data and we're not recommending services without collecting data. So I did put some data collection sheets as samples in your packet to review, but that was another system that I needed to put in place when I arrived. The only thing else that I wanted to mention is, a lot of our students are using fast-moving technology, and I think it's really important that they have the cutting-edge interventions that they require. We did not really have a district replacement plan for some of our iPads, so that's something that I worked on with Barry's department to really come up with a replacement plan in a 3-year plan, because you can't just replace all the technology. So what we did was we reviewed all the technology we have in the district, we updated it, we looked at who was using it, and we looked at anything was old, and we bought new equipment for students. And I think that is something, technology is moving quickly all the time, and before you know it, those iPads are The space is filled up, and we can't afford that. A lot of our students need those iPads to communicate. We need to make sure there's a replacement plan, so that is also now in place. So addressing existing areas of concern. So we want to make sure that we're reviewing decision-making and practices that are aligned with the law. We've had some improper practices that really exposed the district to some legal risks that I had to undo some of that decision-making, which was challenging. We also created a comprehensive out-of-district list to determine the number of students that are serviced in other placements, and we really spent some time evaluating what are those placements, what do the students require, and how are we monitoring how they're doing, and what are the practices that we have in place to consider, are they ready to come back to district? And if they were, do we have the programming in the district? So I think I've talked to you before about, we have a crossover of population in our TLC, social emotional students and students on the autism spectrum. And I would love to untangle that and really think about, when you see my future vision is really having programs for students on the autism spectrum that are inclusive programs. I think the prescription and services are different, and right now we have the same program delivering that service. So that's something that we have to really think about. Okay, what else? I talked a little bit about, I think, the technology already. You know, we have to really think about evaluation of students and using the right tools to evaluate students. So we're in the process of doing a deep dive of what evaluation tools are we using, who's using them, why are we using them, and how are we using them to identify students with disabilities. So I think those are all really important things that we're going to continue to work on and evolve our practice in that area. Sorry, Barry, I was a little ahead of myself. I got enthusiastic and went too far. So let's talk about the new Massachusetts IEP. This was a vast undertaking. If this is the only thing I did this year, I would have put a couple of stars. This was huge. This is a brand new document. It looks different, it feels different, and it required a lot of training. The Department of Ed did put out a 274 grant, so we were awarded, which I applied for, we were awarded about $42,000 for implementation. So we had a lot of professional development on the new IEP. So general ed and special education staff had an overview of the new IEP during PD sessions last year. It was called What's the Same and What's Different? So really looking at the IEP through the lens of, how does this document looks different, but there are things that are similar. So let's figure those things out, and then how are we going to deal with the things that look very different? The second PD at all 13 schools for the special ed teachers across the district and the related service providers and EEC was a deep dive into accommodations and goals. The accommodation pages, there are 4 now. We had 2 before. So we have to have a real understanding of what are we putting on each of those pages. So teachers have really gotten extensive professional development and training. We offered 3 parent training sessions that were held. We did one in the morning, we did one at night, we did one early evening so we could capture all of our parents. Shanna Haber, our special ed specialist, actually videoed herself. It is on the website, so if people have not been able to go to a new IEP training, it is on the website, and you can walk through it with her. So she took a leap of faith and took, sometimes it's very difficult to have yourself videoed, and she just felt like it was really important to share that with the district, the work she had done. So I just wanted to send a shout out to Shanna for doing that work. We did a lot of training with the team chairs. That was a focus of every team chair meeting that we had the last 10 months was that new IEP, to make sure we had a good understanding for people leading that meeting. We also contracted with Power School because now you have a new form that needs to get translated into a new document, and it is very different inputting the information. So we've worked with Power School on the new form. There are some still things that need to be added and tweaked. I've purchased consult hours through our grant so we can get some of that training, and some of those reports I talked about earlier, they're actually going to come to a team chair meeting and show us how to run the reports based on the new forms. So it's all exciting work. It will be a continued focus. Last year, we worked extensively on the family and student input forms. So whether you're 3 or you're 21, every student has to have a voice in the meeting. I think it's probably the best thing they could have done with the New Massachusetts IEP. We want to hear the student's voice. What are their goals? What do they love about school? What are they hoping to learn? So we developed both family input forms with questions, so families could come in prepared about talking about what their concerns were for the year. We developed a student input form, and I think these are all in your packet. You will also see there's some students who may be nonverbal and need visuals to participate. We did those as well. We created those forms as well, and I've shared that in the informational packet tonight. I will tell you, with the new rollout, things are going quite well. I think we did a lot of training. We did a lot of talking. Have we hit some bumps with technology? Yes. Do our staff have continued questions? Yes. So I knew that would happen. It's September. It's brand new. So what I did was I purchased some professional development hours for all 13 schools. So if they had follow-up questions, they could virtually meet with one of the professional development providers to ask questions. So 5 schools have already signed up, and they come in with lots of questions, and then they bring it back to the team chair meeting, and then we can have some real dialogue about what we've learned along the way. So that's been really exciting work. So what's ahead? What are the big action steps and the big ideas for what's coming? I think I shared last year that we were doing co-teaching for the first time at the middle school level. We are continuing that work this year. It is critically important that we are doing that, continuing with professional development in the co-teaching model. Co-teaching is like a good marriage, and it really works well if you continue to work on your professional practice. The regular educators, as much as the special educators, reached out and said, "Are we doing that this year?" They were so excited about the work. The work will look different this year, because I think that when you're doing professional development with staff, you can talk about co-teaching, you can talk about how to plan a lesson. It is much different when the people that are providing the PD come into your classrooms and work with your students and model it for you. So we're going to have some PD on our half days, but we're also going to have some modeling where the teachers can actually see the professional developers working with our students in a co-taught model at the middle school. So I'm really excited about that work this year. I've talked a lot about the root cause analysis. That is work that we're going to be doing with the Department of Ed in 2 weeks. We have a 3D training that we'll be going to, and then we have a 2-day training in January to really look at how can we look at that indicator data, improve our professional practice with students. The procedural manual is complete. I've completed my part. IT has a lot of work to do to upload all the elements. But if you go on our website now, you will see there are things that are being added every week so that we have a comprehensive procedural manual online. So that's certainly a goal. We want to complete the school committee commissioned independent evaluation of the special ed programs. We are continuing to explore what other unified courses we can offer at the high school. We have already generated a handful of ideas to head in that direction. I will mention to you that we are already starting a unified school store. So our school store used to only be open a little bit every day. So we're looking to open it full time and have Wachusett students and some of our students in the program working together to have the school open every single day. So it'll be more like a retail store, and so there are lots of jobs that they can learn through that process. So we're excited to have that up and running soon. The other thing we want to do is explore opportunities to expand inclusive practices at the Early Childhood Center. Essential, essential, essential. I can't say this enough. We have some substantially separate programs that really could benefit from having peers in their classroom. And I really feel like that's a piece that we need to work on all together as a staff of how can we provide those experiences for our youngest children and promote inclusion for them. The other thing is we are implementing PD for related service providers, ABAs, PAs, and paraprofessionals. I have worked with the related service providers on enhancing Tier 1 supports in the general ed classroom. So we can really think about how can we help teachers include some of their expertise in what they're doing every day with the students. This week, during the parent-teacher conference release days, our paras and PAs have a variety of offerings for professional development. We've gotten some we just sent out the offerings, so I will share with you what they are. Fostering self-regulation in young children, self-regulation strategies for grades 5 through 12, inter-reading training to support the new reading curriculum in our K-5 classrooms, inclusive practices and the new IEP, and crisis prevention intervention training. So really thinking about the staff that are supporting our students and tailoring professional development so to help them lift the work as well. So some of the long-term goals, I think I've talked about this a little bit already. We want to expand our in-district programs. So I've already talked about our tangled, what we have and what we would like to have. We really want to better define our program structure, purpose, and service. And we want to move away from disability mindsets and terminology. So I think I've spent a lot of time talking to you about the labels and really thinking about the work of the program and how we're providing certain goals and objectives for students because we want to lift the work. So we want to change mindsets to think all students have abilities. They all have talents. They're all unique. And we know they're all capable of meeting high standards. We have to raise the bar and help them meet those high standards. We want to develop more continuity between programs and inclusionary experiences. We're working on entrance and exit criteria for programs, so not just continuing a child in a program. If they've made progress, we want them out in inclusion and we want to release them to be part of that inclusive experience. We want to embed instructional support in general ed settings and ensure sacred instructional time is adhered to. I talk about this all the time, and I think you guys are probably tired of me talking about that. So. And then, I really, in the future, want to think about, we've got to expand our co-teaching model at the elementary level. So that's some of the long-term goals that are coming. We have just, for the first time in the last year, have unified extracurricular programming. We want more at the high school. We have probably 50 clubs at this high school. We need more for our special needs students. So we are talking about what are the other things that we can provide students at the high school. There's been a cry from the middle school levels across Massachusetts of you started these unified sports. At the high school level, they have started to roll it out in middle school. So that is one of my goals, is to bring that to the middle school as well. I would love us to have a Best Buddies program. I think Best Buddies has such an inclusive opportunity for peers to get to know each other in a very different way, and then have activities after school for both of our middle school students. We have Mountaineer peers at the high school. We don't have a middle school Best Buddies. So I would really like to explore that. Certainly around problem resolution, we want to work with parents. We want to know early what the problems are. I think sometimes when we've gotten to problem resolution, things have gone on for months and months and months, and we haven't had a conversation first. So really equipping people at the building to have meaningful communication and connections with people to resolve problems early. I want to expand that team chair role. I think, I love all the APs in the district, but I think the principals would really love it if they could support some of the instructional leadership. So I would really like to expand that model. I really want to think about child find. We have one preschool in Jefferson. I worry, are we reaching all the kids in all of our communities? So I want us to really think about how are we doing outreach with our young children? How are we letting families know that we're here? I think sometimes when you have preschools and your elementary schools, parents are coming in, they're having conversations, they're getting to know people. Our early childhood center is only at Jefferson, so we have to really figure out if that's the model we're going to keep, what are we going to do to outreach to families? And lastly, I really would love us to join a collaborative. There's some real benefits to being part of collaborative programming. There are professional development opportunities. There are programs that collaboratives have that schools sometimes don't have enough students to represent, so they get a better experience if they're with other students. Some collaboratives have transportation options, so I kind of want to look at all the collaboratives we have in the area and say, what's right for Wachusett? All right, thank you. I'm sorry, that was a lot.
We asked for a comprehensive, discussion on the special education program, and I think that's what you gave us. So I think now we'll open it up to questions. Sherry and Lauren, I have for first two.
So you obviously had a lot to untangle when you got here. I'm impressed with all that you have done. I'm glad to see the long-term goals. I think we've been missing those for a little bit, and I understand that was, you had to see where we were before you can see where we're going. I see a need for continuity and procedure across buildings, the need for a coordinator clearly. But what else can we do to help? I mean, we talked last year, budget season, about simply truly asking for what we needed. It was a lean year, with the understanding that this year we were going to ask for what we needed. And I'm really hoping that we're going to see from special ed the request to get the program where it needs to be. And I appreciate the looking at different, not just hiring a bunch of more paras, although they're terrific. That might not be the right solution. I appreciate you looking at that. But truly considering what the right needs are for each building so that come budget time, we have a solid number and a realistic ask from the towns.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I think that the school psych role needs to be untangled from the counseling and doing FBA. Like, it's too much. And while we've added 2 CBAs to the district, I think we're in need of more. So I'm pretty clear about some of the asks. And Dr. Litaz, I got to mention her because she and I work very closely together under the student service umbrella. We need more guidance counselors in our school. I mean, we can't close our eyes to the supports that kids need through the mental health lens. So those are things that we consistently are talking about in terms of ads. I did ask for a coordinator this year. I did not get that, respectfully. I understand why, but I think shifting what I did shift was really important because I feel like the TLC is really getting continuity of the supports that they need.
Okay, I had Lauren, and then Linda, and then Carl.
As you said, that was a lot, and I think that maybe it would help you and all of us and the families and the community to increase communication. Maybe we could work on doing these a little bit more often. Maybe getting some updates. That seemed like a lot for you to prepare and a lot for us to take in. So a lot of what I heard you say echoed a lot of what I heard Dr. Riley speak about when he first started in the first 2 years with that. There was that. As in the district, there was no systems in place for special education. There was no equity between the schools or the programs. There weren't common data points or forms. And then I always think about, and I will be the one that always beats this drum about our overwhelmed staff and the turnover of our administration. Since those PRS complaints, we had essentially a 90% turnover in district administration and so many new principals and APs coming into the district. So I think that also, it's not an excuse, but it does have a lot to do with things. I think the difference with special education is that it's so personal and very emotional. I was at one time a very overwhelmed and angry special education parent in this district. but my child is right now at an amazing place, advocating for himself, getting ready for college, so I'm not as involved. He's, we in the district did the work, and he's where he needs to be. So that emotion doesn't always come up for me as much as it does. And you talked about a lot of change. Change is really, really hard. We can all say it, but we all really feel it. It was a lot of change. And one thing that struck me was that you said that you had to do some decision-making, you had to undo some decision-making that put us at legal risk as a district. I think there's a lot to be said for what you and all of our administration walked into in this district. So I know there are issues and problems, but I do appreciate the work that you had to do that was given to you that you did not choose to do. What struck me really was when you talked about working individually with 3 students to help them graduate. I love that you did that. I think that's maybe what a lot of our families are looking for too, is more time with you. And I do truly believe that it's a staffing issue. And I love that the administration always talks about the staff that we hire should hit students first. They should be interacting with students. But I really do believe that support comes from the top down. And if you don't have the time to support the people you need to support and don't have the time to help those parents figure out those issues or even communicate with them appropriately, I really think that's where a lot of things come from. So I echo what Member Haber said, and I really do hope that when budget season comes, we see a real and true ask of what your office and what your entire program needs to get us away from the extreme emotion we're all having. And I really want what's best for every student in this district, including all of our special education students. So,
thank you for saying that. I don't think the thing I said is I'm present at the schools often. I've observed students. I couldn't even tell you how many meetings I've gone to, so I want to be engaged in that process, but it's a balance of where can you be, how many meetings can you be at, and how can you lift the work and move it forward and deal with the things that are happening at the same time. So I agree that sometimes you get spread thin.
Okay. Go ahead, Linda next.
I just have a question with the new IEP process. So have any of the new IEP process team meetings occurred yet? Have parents, and when was the first one unrolled? Was it just
Probably the first week of school.
Yeah, so not last spring, but just
this
September.
year, this school year, yes. So we spent a lot of time prepping to roll that out.
Thank you.
Carl.
So I wanted to kind of, to a degree, echo some of the statements made by a few of my colleagues earlier, especially on the topic of staffing. And it seems the slide that you had kind of shown the 2 pages worth of staffing changes that we've made. Certainly, kind of the takeaway note, and you talked about like what we have versus what we need. And certainly like the thing that it's the sense that I got from that was that or at least you look at it and you're like, man, that's a lot of staffing. And it seems like it's a good start. But again, as they've echoed, that when it comes time for budget seasoning, I really think we need to see what staffing the district needs to meet our requirements to be able to provide all the services, all the support that our students need within special ed. And I think, anecdotally, that for too long it's been kind of we've looked for too much efficiency in that area, and having folks go above and beyond, perhaps even more than other disciplines maybe in that regard. And so again, I really hope that and when you come budget time, that we can see a true reflection, a true capturing of that. And I try not to take my colleagues to task very often. I try to keep that in mind. But I certainly, I encourage everyone in this body that, especially, when we're talking about special education, it really shouldn't be an ask. It really is a need. It's a requirement. And so I'd at least encourage everyone to avoid when we're talking about this as an ask, that this is something that we have to have. And when you get to a have to have, that's really not an ask. So just try to take a look at it from that perspective. And so when it comes budget time, I look forward to seeing what we need.
Thank you.
Malia.
Thank you for all of the time that went into this and the detail. I assume this will be put on the website at some point. It's a lot of information, so I guess that's a request that perhaps it be put on the website in some clearly identified place. Because there's a lot in here. And I appreciate that. I think it answers a lot of questions that a lot of us have been asking. So I would definitely echo the request for perhaps more frequent kind of check-ins about what you are doing, even if it's just a written report, in the superintendent's report, so that we have some idea of what's going on with some of these. I'm happy to hear the general direction, though, and that there are a lot of conversations, a lot of effort to improve systems. I will look forward to hearing updates on kind of how some of that progresses, when Desi's here and when you have those workshops that they're coming, bringing their staff here for. I look forward to hearing updates on how those actually go and kind of where your staff is going with that information. Because we can have meetings and meetings and meetings, but it's important for at least me and I think this body to hear what comes out of those meetings and kind of where the direction is going. I had a couple of specific questions, comments, etc. I definitely think the communication is a big concern, and I would echo the need for considering additional staffing. I mean, one of the issues that I have heard as well throughout time, and has led to probably some of our complaints, is that sometimes there is a need for meetings or a need for even mediation, which is not ideal either, but is a step before you get to more serious things and more costly things. But oftentimes staff is not available to meet in whatever time frame. And so I think that goes back to staffing of both providers, our teachers actually needing to teach versus the amount of time they're spending in meetings, your staff and your staff time. It's a concern, but I think we need to look at ways, and I hope we can look at ways that would also make sure that those kinds of meetings can happen in a timely manner and not be put off, for example, over the summer if it's a decision about the next school year, but your staff isn't available to meet in that 3 weeks before school ends, then that student essentially starts the new year without a plan. And I think that is hopefully not often, but I know I know from talking to people, and I as well have had experience in our family, that sometimes that timing gets really frustrated because you need an answer for your student. And in that time, while you're waiting to have the meetings, because staff isn't really available, the student is not getting services, whether they're in stay put or they're just not getting a new IEP or not getting something resolved. Their needs aren't being met while everyone messes around with schedules. And so I know that's a reality, but I think looking at staffing from that lens as well and making sure there is enough to ensure that our students are able to have those meetings and our families in a timely manner. I'm happy that you're so involved. I wonder if you being the team chair at the high school, that's one thing that caught my attention.
I am not the team chair.
Oh, you're not?
I am not the team chair. I could never do that.
I thought you said that you were, so I apologize.
In terms of coordination and support, the director always should be involved with the high school in terms of, there's a lot of technical things that happen in high schools that I think it's really important that Shauna and Shanna have that support available.
Well,
So I
that
meet
makes
with
me
them on
feel
a
better that
bi-weekly
you're not the
basis.
actual team chair, because
No,
that's
I
a
am
very
not.
heavy lift. So it's another area, though, where I wonder, just looking at staffing, because you have a lot on your plate and there's obviously a lot you need to work on, and the department is working on, but I think we need to just look at it through that lens as well, and that people are losing services in some cases, and students, I know a couple students who even left the district because they couldn't have their meetings in time to start the new school year, and so they chose to leave the district. And so those are things we just really need to take a look at through that lens. I don't expect an answer on this tonight, but I am personally very, I am concerned and hope there is some progress on this. You essentially acknowledge that we're not meeting the needs of many of our students that are on the autism spectrum because we are combining them with other programs.
I don't think that I said we're not meeting their needs. I think there could be a better way to meet their needs with a different type of programming.
So this was that was my point of my question, that I don't know where that falls, but I hope and I look forward to hearing an update on how we are planning to do that in the interim, because the perfect program is not going to be here tomorrow, but we know that by your analysis that there are needs that aren't being met or aren't being met to those students, to what they need. There's a program it's not tailored to their needs. And so I know we have a lot of those students, and a lot of them end up out of district, a lot of them end up in programs that don't, in the current situation where they don't have their needs met. And so I am concerned about that group of students, in particular when you pointed that out, and that we make sure that we're finding a way in the interim before, before this new program that hopefully we'll create or whatever solution evolves, that we find ways in the interim to make sure we're meeting their needs and not just putting them in a box, because that's what we have right now. I hope we are doing some creative thinking on that, and so I hope that comes up in some of the other work you're doing with Bessie and other things. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Malia. Laura.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this update, and I echo Lauren's comment about getting more frequent updates so that we don't have to digest so much and you don't have to prepare so much. But this was really, really a good, large step forward. One of the areas that I didn't hear anything about, we've talked about staffing. I don't think I need to hit that point any harder. But what I did not hear is capacity building within our general education teachers to enhance what's happening in the general education classroom to mitigate, the students, for lack of a better word, because it's 9:30 at night, deficits, and really build on their strengths. I'll speak for myself as a teacher, that this new IEP process and thinking about things as strengths rather than deficits requires me as a general education teacher to get up to speed, and how we complete assessment, Form B assessments, and those sort of things. How are we building the capacity within our general education staff to work within this new IEP process, to provide the proper feedback, and also to enhance the skills and teaching within the classroom, whether or not there's a co-teaching model. Because if all of our students are general education students first, we have to be building the capacity through our professional development processes. So that's a question for me. I don't expect you to answer that tonight, obviously, but that's something that I think moving forward would be an update for a future report. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. I did have one question. You talked about the RCA workshops that are going to happen. Can you tell me who's involved in those, or is that just...
I didn't.
RCA workshops that you talked about? Who's involved in those? Is that just staff? Is there community input into those?
Do you mean for the professional development that's happening this week?
No, I thought you said there were some RCA workshops. You were partnering with the root cause analysis workshops. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, the acronym threw us all off.
It's late.
Yeah, so the root cause analysis workshops that you're doing with the state, who's involved in that process?
There are other districts that needs intervention and needs assessment, so they have signed up, and they're facilitators from what's called Special Education Strategies Group that will be facilitating those sessions.
And is that just staff, or is there like community input into that process?
It's just faculty members.
Okay, thanks. All right, so again, thank you. And I think I liked that presentation. I thought there was a lot of good information. I think it's good that we're acknowledging there are problems. We've all heard them here, and we all get emails from constituents as well. And there's always going to be people that aren't happy. Like Lauren said, I have been an angry special ed parent with not a lot of time to deal with things and upset with the district in the past. I'd just like to leave with one thing from personally. My daughter's a senior in high school this year, and I just want to say the difference between her freshman year in this high school and her senior year in this high school is night and day in a good way. The inclusive opportunities that have been increased over time, we've talked about unified sports, unified classes, she's had a chance to participate in a lot of those things, and just the overall culture of the high school, I've seen an immense shift in the 4 years that she's been at this high school. So I want to thank the whole administration and you for helping to push that forward, as well as the staff at the high school. There certainly are still things that we need to address in this district. We can't deny it, we all admit it, but I think we are moving in the right direction, and I'm hopeful that we can continue collaborating with all of our stakeholders and continue moving in that direction. So thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay. So we have a couple more presentations. It's 9:20. The purpose of doing these meetings, 2 meetings a month, is we were going to try and be out of here by 9, despite George actually warning me that we'd always fill the time. I remember you saying that. But my suggestion is going to be that we hear the presentations from administration that were planned for tonight, but anything else on the agenda after that, we postpone to the next meeting because it's going to be late. But I know your administration has prepared reports, and I'd like to hear those tonight.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll adjourn.
It'd be wonderful, and particularly for Dr. Litas, who put a lot of work into her presentation. I can kind of punt on a component of this and leave it up to committee, but one of the things we were going to offer an update for, and Director DeAngelis had put it in our presentation, is our special education program review. And at some point, we need feedback from the committee in terms of direction. And I wanted to share some of the work that we've done and how we've interpreted that charge from the committee. And basically what we did is we put the special education program review into the district improvement plan that we had shared a meeting or 2 ago. And it talked about, how we were going to try to identify specialists and also the criteria where they would look at our programming. Well, some of the feedback we got after the district improvement plan where people were wondering about to what end, what was the scope of the special education programming review. And was it inclusive of substantially separate programs? Was it all district-wide programming, or was it perhaps something larger? And so I was under the impression that was under district-wide programs, but certainly wanted to bring it to the committee and make sure we were getting feedback from you. And then also we had talked about working with CPAC and getting their input in terms of what their thoughts were in terms of what would be needed, what would be helpful in the district. And so we went back and we looked at the motion. And I think that's where we go back, in that the motion, and I'll be honest with you, I'm as guilty as anyone. It's really about if program placements or district programs are going to potentially be moved. However, when you look at the meeting and what we talked about during that meeting, we definitely did talk about program reviews. And so perhaps it's better at the committee meeting in a couple weeks, but it would be helpful for us to get some feedback in terms of the scope of the review that the committee would like to charge us with. And we have some action steps in mind, regardless of what that looks like, and certainly are going to commit to putting an agenda item at the next CPAC administrative meeting. But that is something we want to request of the committee, because we really need that in terms of next steps and understanding what our charge is moving forward.
Anyone like to comment on that before we move on? I can say my own, so I think what we started with what was in the regional agreement, which is that the school committee is supposed to review the placement of all of our district-wide programs annually. That's what it says in the district agreement. So that's where we started, but I agree with you, the discussion at the table was much broader than that, and talking about general special education programming. So if anyone has Linda and then Malia.
I have a logistical question because you went through the slides so fast I couldn't.
Right, Malia and then Linda.
I'm sorry.
That's
I
all
thought
right.
you pointed to me first. I'm so sorry.
So I was just going to say that I think that the location is really important to highlight. So if it does get expanded, I just want to make sure that that location piece is not missed. One of the things that we're looking at in facilities is the early childhood center. and the building that that's in is really inappropriate for the program in a lot of ways, and there's no way to get funding to replace a preschool from the state. And there are some prescribed actions that a district has to take to move a program, and still, there's a complicated process to it. And so I would want to make sure that whatever we're looking at program-wise, we'll be able to capitalize on that information in making those decisions on how to use our facilities. So that's the facilities hat request there.
Leah?
My general question is that I think the things in this are obviously important. I think we got to start on some of this by the brochures and some of the information that we just heard from Dr. DeAngelis, and I think that's helpful. So I think that is one piece of the discussion. My question to administration, though, is you just went through that all very quickly in the interest of time. Is waiting until the next meeting to discuss this substantially holding up you moving forward in a timely manner with this process? If we wait until the next meeting, assuming that we have enough time at the next meeting to have the discussion that you need from us.
It's going to be a long process regardless. And so one of the things, if you look at the action steps that we put into the district improvement plan, you really have to identify people who can do this work. And it depends on what programs you're actually looking at. And so much like Director DeAngelis has different consultants working with all of our programs, right? I think she has 3 consultants or 4 consultants at this point working with our district-wide programs. It's because each of those people have a specific expertise and can support those programs in a particular way. Similarly, if we are charged with having an evaluation of our district-wide programs, we need to identify probably distinct people or vendors who can do that work. That's step number 1. Well, step number 1 is to understand what are we exactly looking at? You know what I mean? Are we looking at all district-wide programs? Is it larger than that in scope? Is it more narrow in scope? And I think when we went back and tried to do some of the research and the question was asked, like, how much are we doing? I think I didn't know, and that's why I'm bringing it back to the committee. But I'd say that's action step number 1. I think number 2, we have to then go out and make sure there are particular conditions that people understand this is what we would like to include in the evaluation. And then it's almost like you're going to go out for almost a bid process, and then you have them come in and do it. And so honestly, realistically, if we get this towards the end of the year, I think we've done very well. It is, and the last thing is we can identify a funding source as well. Because we didn't do this during the budget process, and this is going to be tens of thousands of dollars. And so we want to do it right. I think the last thing we want to do is not include the scope of what people's intentions were when we discussed this at the full committee. But unfortunately, we don't have really a record of that, and I just want to make sure that work is represented in what people are asking for.
Sherry, and then I have a thought. Go ahead.
I see this in maybe 2 phases, a much smaller one and a much larger one. Strictly dealing with regional agreement, I'm envisioning the report that Joan talked about that says how many students are in which program, at which schools, serviced by how many staff, so that we can fulfill that section of the regional agreement. That in itself will, I would hope, lead us to see if we have appropriate staff and in the right buildings and things like that. That's the small part. And I hope that we can do that without funding, right? Then we obviously need a much bigger chunk. And part of that, right, the TLC program possibly separating into 2 separate programs. That, to me, is in this bigger program.
I was going to say exactly what you just said. I think they're 2 separate things. What's outlined in the regional agreement is the responsibility of the school committee, and that can't be tens of thousands of dollars each year, because it says to do it every year, right? So I think it's exactly what Sherry just said, the programs we have, the number of students, and I think something about, are the facilities adequate for each of those programs? Do we have enough classrooms? Do we have playground space? So it's stuff that we can do in-house just in terms of numbers and needs. And I see this as something we should do before we're setting a budget next year, because we need to know that information before we can develop the right budget. But that's something that's the responsibility of the school committee. I also think we should do the comprehensive evaluation, but that could be something that we don't have the funding to do this year, right? That might be something we need to put in the budget for next year. We should do it, but I think we keep them separate so we can make progress on the first without.
It totally makes sense to me. I had a misunderstanding in terms of what the committee had charged us with, and so I apologize for that. I just wanted to clarify that. And yeah, we can do the former, the first part.
I think with both cases, we can collaborate with CPAC to see what other information they'd like to see and what should be in that more comprehensive plan.
It's extremely helpful. Thank you.
All right, so I think we're to the last part.
We are.
Yes.
And thank you, Dr. Litas. Thank you, saving the best for last. Sorry, Director DeAngelis. But thank you for being so patient and an update on bullying across the district. Thank you.
Thank you for having me tonight. All right, so I just wanted to provide an update, a kind of an extension of the presentation I had given at the end of last year, which bullying was a component of, but encompassed other aspects of the civil rights. So I wanted to drill down a little bit on bullying, but also provide some clarification. So first I wanted to talk about reporting requirements to make sure that everyone understands, including the public, what is required of us. I apologize if that's a little bit small. So the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they maintain a school safety and discipline report. So the SSDR is a collection of data that covers student offenses and the resulting disciplines around that. So with respect to bullying, the scope of that is any bullying incident that takes place on school property on school time, and then, of course, the reportable disciplines that result from these incidents. So each school district has to annually report bullying incident data into the department, and that data includes the number of reported allegations of bullying or retaliation, the number and nature of substantiated incidents of bullying or retaliation, and the number of students disciplined for engaging in bullying or retaliation. And then they say any other information that's required by the department. It's important to note that Part 1, that was new for the 21-22 school year. Prior to that, districts were not required to collect and report the number of allegations of bullying or retaliation, only the substantiated incidents. And then Parts 2 and Parts 3 are collected in the annual school safety and discipline report. All right, so how is the SSDR collected? So the school safety discipline data collected. So essentially, the SSDR receives the information that's entered by our building principals or their designees in our school information, our student information system, so which is Power School. From there, the student information system communicates through the school inoperability framework to DESE, and then the school safety and data report is a accumulation of the collection of the data, and it covers the entire school year. So districts have until mid-July of each year to certify the data that's communicated through the student information system. And then DESE posts the statewide report on their webpage. I have a link there, but just so everyone knows, only the school year 2023 report is posted right now, but it is available through that link. So with respect to Wachusett, for 2023, there were 39 reported allegations across the district of bullying. So I wanted to provide you some data around that. What does that mean? Last year when I spoke and I presented some of the data, it looked like our data, our reporting data was really low and inaccurate. So I wanted to kind of clarify what that looks like. So this slide demonstrates comparable districts by proximity. And this is only, again, the 2023 data. So here you'll see a comparison of 8 other districts that are in proximity to Wachusett. So the first column demonstrates the district enrollment. The second column shows the number of bullying allegations for 2023, and then the number of resulting discipline specific to bullying allegations only. And then finally, the percentage of the number of allegations of the district compared to overall enrollment. So this is an example of districts in proximity to us. This slide is just a similar a data point, except it's going to compare districts by DART. So here you have a comparison of 10 other districts, and again, through DART or the DESE's District Analysis Review Tool. So again, first column is enrollment, second column shows the number of bullying allegations, and then the resulting discipline. So not all of allegations will result in a finding or will result in discipline. And then also the final column is the percentage. So the number of allegations based on overall enrollment. Okay. So just to shift a little bit, because I think it's also really important to talk about prevention and intervention. And one of the things that we touched on briefly was the bullying prevention and intervention plan. So each school district must develop, adhere to, and update a plan to address bullying prevention. So the plan has to be updated at least every 2 years, and the Wachusett's Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan was reviewed last December of 2023. That's always available on the district's website. So DESE has a model bullying prevention intervention plan, as well as a checklist for districts to be able to go through, track any of the legislative requirements that are, and ensure that essentially those are all elements of their plan. So of course, as part of our process in the end of 2023, we utilized these tools to cross-reference our previous version to make sure that it was really comprehensive. And then also part of that review is to post the proposed updated plan on the district's website for review so that parents and guardians are encouraged to provide feedback on the plan to us to incorporate and to be thoughtful about. So the general process, again, the plan, the entire plan is available online, but I think just giving a general overview of what that process looks like is important as well. So first off, we receive notice or a report that bullying, right? So that's received. A report or notice can essentially come from anyone, a student, a witness, a parent, a staff member, and it can also come through our district's anonymous reporting tool. So that report is directed to the school's principal or the assistant principal. Next, before fully investigating allegations of bullying, the principal or their designee, they're going to take steps to assess the need to restore a sense of safety and well-being in the school for that alleged target and to protect them from further possible incidents while the investigation process occurs. So responses here could look like having predetermined seating arrangements for the target and or the alleged aggressor, thinking about the classroom seating, thinking about lunch environment, thinking about possibly on the bus or at recess. So just generally thinking of how we can ensure a sense of well-being while the process is transpiring. Another example might be identifying a staff member in the meantime that the student has readily access to if they need to talk to an adult at school. And then there's the notice to parents or guardians. So once that there's a determination that notice is received of bullying and the building principal or designee determines, yes, there is potential bullying here, They are going to notify the parents of both the target and the alleged aggressor. Another thing about notice is that it can include contacting another school, depending on which students are involved, contacting another district, or providing notice to law enforcement. From there, we have the investigation. So the principal or designee, they will investigate the report. They're going to collect as much information as they can from as many sources as possible, or practical to make that determination if bullying is able to be substantiated or not. And then after that is the determination. So based on the facts and the circumstances of the investigation, the data collection, the interviews, any other information that's collected through the investigation, whether or not bullying is substantiated or not. So I want to just say it's important to say what the definition of bullying, right? Because we can find through an investigation that bullying didn't occur, however, behavior occurred, right? That didn't meet the level of bullying. However, that doesn't mean that we don't need to address that or put other corrective actions in place. So that's an important component to mention. So if substantiated, then from there, the principal or assistant principal determines what remedial action is required and what responsive or disciplinary action might be required. And then finally from there, principals will notify the parents, again, of both the target and the aggressor about the results of the investigation, if bullying was found, and what action is being taken. So I mentioned this a little bit with respect to not always through an investigation will a bullying substantiation occur. But when it does, we also have to be very thoughtful about our response when it is substantiated, because it's important to know that our response is not always discipline. Schools have an obligation to teach appropriate behavior, so responses to bullying can include actions like individualized skill building, providing relevant educational activities with counselors or with other school personnel, or adopting behavioral plans. So it's important, again, to communicate that bullying does not always equal discipline. There should be actually many other components to addressing the behavior that's involved there. Next, when we think about prevention and intervention, this also includes training for staff and administration. So under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Section 37O, all school districts must provide ongoing professional development for staff annually, and sometimes even more than that. So our annual training on bullying prevention for all staff includes recognition, staff responsibilities, and obligations to report. And this is part of our beginning of year mandated training for all staff as they are welcomed back to the school year. In addition to that, administration receives additional annual training, which goes beyond the staff, just general staff training. So this includes more specific required information, such as understanding supportive measures, how to respond to allegations, considering bullying with children with disabilities and how that affects those students, the investigation process, how to gather evidence, interviewing, notice of outcome, remedial and corrective actions, disciplinary action, and then, of course, bullying prevention. So our administrator training occurred August 21st of this year. So this slide is, I'm going to speak about some of the good things that are happening around supporting learning, student learning around climate and culture. So the district has invested in Panorama Student Survey, which is a survey instrument that captures and elevates student voice in areas such as school climate, teaching and learning, relationships, and belonging. So the survey essentially gathers feedback from students about their classroom experience. So parents and guardians, they have access to view the survey questions on the Office of Student Support pages of the website. There's a link in there on my pages here. But an example of some of the questions specific to culture, climate, and bullying prevention include questions to students like, how often do you worry about violence at your school? How much respect do students in your school show you? If a student is bullied in school, how difficult is it for him or her to get help from an adult? Or how likely is it that someone from your school will bully you online? How often are people disrespectful to others in your school? So students respond to these questions through a Likert scale, indicating choices like almost never, once in a while, sometimes, frequently, or almost always. So after students complete the survey, school and district staff are able to review the results so that we can better understand the strengths and the needs of students at the building, grade, or individual level. So this information is critical in how we review, evaluate, and improve any of our SEL programming. So again, the results of the survey, that data can help to inform building level initiatives. It can help to design whole class practices or instruction, or it can identify targeted supports for small groups of students. And then, of course, this is in conjunction with other sources of information that helps us to put all of this together to identify additional strategies and supports that would benefit all students. New for this school year, through grant funding, we're able to secure the Choose to Be Nice School Kindness Program for all of our elementary schools. So prior to this year, that program was being used at Glenwood and Mayo schools. And the program is really geared for grades pre-K through 8, and it focuses on 9 important values that include respect, kindness, acceptance, teamwork, honesty, responsibility, friendship, patience, and courage. So schools are able to use the program to focus on one value each month to develop and to instill these values in their school communities. In addition to that, also through grant funding, we're able to secure a subscription for all of our K-8 counselors to pilot the everyday speech, social, emotional learning curriculum. As you all know, the full curriculum adoption process is very comprehensive, and it involves multiple groups of stakeholders to consider and to adopt. So this is a very early step in that process, but an important one for us to begin to understand what are the areas of need that we have as far as social emotional learning delivery and how we can begin to address those gaps. Also through grant funding, we've been able to prioritize at least 2 staff from each school. They will be able to participate in the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center's Bullying and Cyberbullying Prevention Train the Trainer certification. And this is going to allow us to begin to build capacity around our staff, our own staff, to deliver comprehensive bullying and cyberbullying prevention training to their building peers. But before I go on to the next slide, I think it's important, because we have talked about this throughout this evening, that I really also emphasize some of the important information that I shared with you last year on the dire state of the school counseling support at the K-8 level in particular. Because the deficits here really hinder some of the progress that we can make in how we address and proactively create positive climate and culture in our schools. So the current level of school counseling staffing at that K-8 level in particular does not allow the district to be proactive and address climate and culture, which of course also impacts what we see with respect to student behavior and bullying allegations and substantiated findings. All right. Another positive is I just wanted to bring light again to the parent workshop series. I hope you recall last year, this is one of those areas that I'm trying to prioritize, is providing workshops to parents and guardians. So I'm happy to report that we have 3 workshops that are scheduled so far, with the goal of trying to hold at least one each month. So relevant to this presentation is the second bullet. On January 14th, Wachusett is going to host Dr. Elizabeth Englander. She is the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center, or MARC, as I've mentioned before, she's going to talk about specifically bullying and cyberbullying for our parents and guardians. So the center's team, led by Dr. Englander, they do just a tremendous amount of research and work around bullying and cyberbullying. So it's really going to be an honor to have Dr. Englander come and join us in the district that evening. So again, I just want to mention, I'm continually working on bringing new workshops, so I encourage folks to, besides the communication that I send out, updating families, letting them know the things that are going on, you can always check out the Office of Student Support pages on the district website. Okay. Questions?
Thank you very much. Questions? Jen and then Carl.
So, taking this back. Sorry. Okay. It's all Shannon's fault. No. So thank you so much for that report. I appreciate it very much. I had a couple of questions in different areas. First, for the parent workshop series, do we know how well those have been attended? Do we have any?
It depends on the topic.
Okay.
I think it also is impacted by time of year. So
yeah.
Maybe in November, December, workshop might not be as well attended. Again, that's a busy time of year for a lot of people. But one of the things that I've done is when people enroll to attend the workshop, just to let us know they're coming, I do ask them to fill out some general questions so that I can understand what they're interested in, what parents and guardians are interested in, or what they need. Some information around what scheduling issues they might have, those kinds of things. So I'm happy to report on that in the future of what last year's data uncovered.
Okay. And then I wasn't sure if we were allowed from some of the presenters, or for some of these that are in person, if they're allowed to be recorded at all, to be put on the website for parents who can't attend to be able to access some of that information at a later date.
It depends on the presenter.
Depends on the presenter.
Yeah. Some presenters will allow it, and some presenters feel it's that's their privileged material that they're presenting on and don't. So
Right.
whenever possible, I would make that available.
Okay. Can I keep going, Scott? I have
go ahead.
more? Okay. As far as the panorama data, you had mentioned that can be used to either bring in supports or change programs for an entire school or for a grade or for a class or a certain amount of kids. Could we get some more details on what programs or things have been put in place specifically from that data? So like, what have we done so far with that data, and what things have we implemented solely due to that? I know you might not have that right now, but maybe that's something that we can see in the future, what we've been able to actually do with that information.
Yes. And can I just say, too, that part of our strategic plan is being more thoughtful and purposeful about the data that we have, and meeting with different stakeholders to dig through that more comprehensively. So I would be very happy to bring that forward.
Oh, great. That would be wonderful. And then I do appreciate you discussing legally what constitutes bullying versus what is not considered bullying, because I know that there is, because the number seems so low, and I'm sure that there is a lot of widespread behaviors or microaggressions or things that parents and students are seeing that still need to be addressed, which is I'm glad why we're having these SEL programs, but that don't necessarily fall fully under the very specific limitations of bullying. So I think we need to speak often about the differences and how the different areas are being addressed. So I think that's really very important. And then the only other question I had is, and I'm sure it's very hard to get data on this, is do we feel that there are more bullying incidents where perhaps they're not getting filed? So either people don't feel comfortable or there was a discussion with the principal and they kind of worked, they never did an official filing. Do you have a sense of that at all, or can you gather a sense of that? I know that's difficult.
I don't know that we've identified a way to collect that.
Right.
But I think I do want to address an official report, right?
Right.
Because when somebody comes forward and communicates that they think, bullying has occurred or they're reporting particular behavior, we should be acting on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a report, right? So whether it comes through on the official, bullying report form or not, we are obligated to do that preliminary investigation where we're inquiring, like, what is this? Is this, does this rise to that level of, this could be, and we need to do a full and comprehensive investigation, or is it, more low level, student behavior that occurs in the class that might be developmentally typical, that is addressed at a minor level. So it's important to note that whenever we're receiving any type of report, that we should be acting on that to determine next steps.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Carl and then Sherry.
So appreciate the information that kind of talks or steps through the process for with bullying allegations and like kind of when it happens. Question I had was in regards to the investigation phase. So it wasn't mentioned in your presentation, kind of like how how a determination or how investigation proceeds, because as we know, in the legal world, there's really two standards of proof, bong bong. There's beyond a reasonable doubt that something has happened, and then there's preponderance of evidence. And so it's spelled out in our harassment procedures that it's only preponderance of evidence. So if I allege that teacher, Superintendent Jim, has harassed me based on something, and you're doing the investigation, it's only preponderance of evidence. That's like 51-49 that it did happen. And then you say, yes, the allegation is founded. I don't see that, like, what standard of proof is used for a bullying investigation? Is it the same preponderance of evidence, or is it beyond a reasonable doubt? Because I would think it would be the same, but Mass General Law may be different. And so I think people, at least the public should know what standard of proof we use for these investigations.
Yes, so throughout the district, in any of our processes, so bullying, any of our civil rights grievance processes, the Title IX, it's always preponderance of the evidence. So we're a school district, we're not a courtroom, and so it's important to know that that type of investigation that has to occur is, as you said, preponderance of the evidence. 50% plus a feather, right? That's all that's needed to make a determination. So the investigator is going to collect information in however way the information leads. So that can include interviewing students, interviewing staff, if there's video surveillance available, where it was located, the behavior was located, anything essentially that is going to help to inform the investigation and provide the information to determine that 50% plus a feather.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry?
I was interested to see the numbers versus our comparisons. On one hand, I was kind of thinking it was going to be higher and kind of wondering why we weren't higher. And on the other hand, I was kind of happy we weren't higher. I almost want to see a breakdown by school or by town or something. I feel like, you know, as school committee members, we hear about bullying. And again, maybe it doesn't fit the exact definition and that's why they aren't there. But, you know, part of me wonders, are some schools doing fantastic things and their bullying number is at 0 because they have kindness programs? Is one principal really good at making sure that everything is documented and that school is going to have more cases documented than another school? I want to make sure that we're seeing the whole picture and doing things right across the board. And I feel like 13 schools and 39 cases, and you can say, okay, well, that's 3 per school, but you know it's not. You know, so I just think that having a little bit more in-depth there would help serve purpose.
Absolutely. And I can't agree with you more. So one of the things that I look at, you know, since I've started is understanding the district and asking those questions and digging through and seeing where are the areas that we have really good data, where are the areas that we need better data collection. I talked a little bit about this the last time, that I think we absolutely have opportunities to improve our reporting, improve how we are documenting, being consistent with responding to any allegations, and also increasing the amount of similar experiences for students around prevention, right? 2 or 3 schools shouldn't have access to PBIS programs and other schools not have access to it, or different language is used at different schools. We really have an opportunity to enhance what we're doing to provide a better experience for all of our students.
Linda.
I just want to bring up the chart that you had shared with all of the different numbers in the reporting. You know, and I too kind of was looking at, you know, years ago, I think it was in 2021, where a previous member of the administration had shared what was required to be reported to DESE, and it was like there was 1 bullying incident, and we kind of, at the time in the subcommittee, were thinking, well, that doesn't seem remotely possibly accurate. And I see now, comparing to other districts, you know, it looks like there's something lacking in the reporting structure that the state requires. And so I think that there's a lot of value in investigating the data that way. I don't know how much we can do with it at this table, but I think that it's a really interesting look at why aren't these kind of anecdotal reports of bullying that you hear around, like, why aren't they getting documented in some fashion, in some quantifiable way? But I also look at how many very systemic things are going on that you can see in the state data that we see. I mean, we're not immune from being part of the state, obviously. So I guess that was just my kind of feeling of if we do a deep dive on it, I don't know how much we can glean from the numbers itself, but I think they're good questions to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's eye-opening to see the comparisons of the different districts, because clearly, I mentioned this last time too, that the definitions or the communication of what DESE is looking for and the translation of the data that gets reported, you know, clearly there's discrepancy there and confusion across the state. So we want to look to it, yes, these are the things that are required reporting, but what is going to be helpful to us as a district to collect in order to make sure that we can act and continue to make improvement in these areas.
Melissa.
So I just have one comment or question. When I was a principal at Dawson, we did the Panorama survey, and it was a great survey, but a lot of times the grades 3 and 4 students didn't understand the questions, so we didn't get that valuable data. I was wondering if Panorama has created like a more early childhood or younger elementary school survey that would allow us to have better information for those young students.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple components there, because the questions are worded and they've done a lot of research around them being developmentally appropriate and understandable. I would agree with you that sometimes it could be in how we're administering the survey or how we're setting up the survey that might be not clear for students. One of the things that I was able to observe when we administered it last year is one of the teachers gave me great feedback, invited me into the classroom, and one of the things that she did was there are two surveys, essentially two different sections. And because she had younger students, she did not do the surveys one after the other. That was too much for them because it was like information overload. She just arranged her schedule to be able to do them on 2 separate days. I think that was amazing, and it really helps to really make sure that the data that's collected from students is more accurate from their perspective, right? So it's like identifying those kinds of things and sharing that out so that we can continue to evolve our best practices.
Thank you.
I have just one question. We hear periodically, other people have mentioned it, from parents that are very concerned because they think something's going on at school and their child doesn't feel safe going to school. And of course, I think any parent, if they're hearing that their child doesn't feel safe at school, will lie down in front of the school bus before, it's a very emotional situation. So in cases where we're not finding that there's actual bullying for whatever reason, but we still have families where that child doesn't feel safe going to school, what recourse does a family have, or what do we have in place in the schools to help these students out that aren't feeling safe for whatever reason, even if it's not official bullying?
Yeah, absolutely. So then that goes back to me speaking to, there's still behavior going on, even though it doesn't rise to being a substantiated bullying, a case. So we do need to address the different behavior and understand it. So one of the initial things that principals do is put in place interim supportive measures. So what are the things that we might do to try to increase that sense of wellness for the student in the short term? But then after the investigation concludes, do we need to continue those interim supportive measures, or are there some other things that we can do to help the student, right? Again, looking at that, do we need to provide small group instruction? Do we need to provide some classroom instruction, grade level instruction? Are there areas that, particular issues that are bubbling up that we can address on a more broad level, right, to address that what might be between 2 students or a group of students, but what can we do to continue to address it, even if it wasn't bullying? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's the community and culture environment that we're making sure that is the best for our students in our schools.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. And it is up to the committee. This is all of our meeting, but I would suggest that everything else we could move to the next meeting, and I would be open to a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, non-debatable. I don't believe there's anyone online.
No.
Do we have anyone online? Which means we can actually just do a voice vote. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone abstain? We are adjourned.